The air shimmered with an unnatural glow as Aelric stepped into the clearing, his heart pounding with the weight of the legends he had grown up hearing. Before him, towering above the dense forest, were the Shimmering Gates of Eldoria. They looked almost ethereal, their edges gleaming with a soft, silvery light, as though they weren't entirely part of this world. For centuries, the gates had remained a mystery, hidden deep in the forgotten corners of ancient maps. They were said to guard a land untouched by time, realm where the past, present, and future converged. But no one who sought them had ever returned. Aelric's fingers trembled as he reached into his cloak and pulled out the map, the parchment worn and fragile. The old cartographer in the city had said the map was a fool's errand, but Aelric felt the pull of something deeper, a strange sense of destiny. His father had disappeared seeking these gates years ago, and now Aelric stood at the same threshold. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest hum of a song, a melody he didn't recognize but felt deep in his bones. He took a step forward, and the ground beneath him shifted. The gates flickered, the shimmering light pulsing in rhythm with the hum. His breath caught in his throat. As he moved closer, the gates seemed to expand, revealing an intricate pattern of symbols carved into their surface, glowing faintly with a bluish hue. His father had spoken of these symbols in his journals, but seeing them in person filled Aelric with both awe and dread. He could feel the power radiating from them, ancient and incomprehensible. Suddenly, a shadow passed over the gates, like a ripple in the air. Aelric froze, his hand instinctively gripping the hilt of his sword. The shadow lingered, hovering just beyond the threshold, an outline of something, or someone, moving within the shimmering veil. It was a figure, cloaked in darkness, standing on the other side of the gates. Aelric's heart raced. The figure didn't move, but its presence was undeniable, as though it were waiting for him to make the next move. Aelric hesitated, his thoughts racing. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but something deeper held him in place, pulling him toward the unknown. He couldn't leave, not now. Not after coming this far. With a deep breath, Aelric stepped closer. As his foot touched the base of the gates, the shimmering light intensified, and the air around him vibrated with an energy that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. The figure beyond the gates remained still, but its gaze, though unseen, seemed to pierce through Aelric's very soul. Then, without warning, the gates began to move. They didn't open like ordinary doors. Instead, they seemed to dissolve, the shimmering surface rippling outward like water disturbed by a stone. Beyond them lay a path, winding into an endless mist, the light dim and otherworldly. Aelric's breath hitched as he took a cautious step forward, crossing the threshold into the unknown. The air was different here, heavier, colder. The ground beneath his feet felt strange, not quite solid, as though it were shifting ever so slightly. The mist curled around his legs, and with each step, the world behind him seemed to fade further into obscurity. He glanced back, but the gates had already disappeared, swallowed by the swirling fog. For a moment, Aelric felt utterly alone. But then, from the depths of the mist, the faintest whisper reached his ears. It was the same melody he had heard before, but this time, it carried with it a voice, a woman's voice, soft and haunting, calling his name. His heart skipped a beat. How could she know his name? Aelric drew his sword, his knuckles white as he gripped the hilt. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silence. The mist shifted, and the figure appeared again, closer this time, still cloaked in shadow. Aelric tensed, his pulse racing. The figure didn't speak, but the voice, her voice, seemed to come from all around him. "You seek answers," the voice whispered, "but answers come at a price." Aelric's mind raced. He had expected danger, but this was something far more sinister. The legends had spoken of treasures beyond imagining, of knowledge long lost to time, but they had never mentioned this. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The figure took a step forward, the mist parting slightly as it moved. "It is not about what I want," the voice replied, the tone colder now, sharper. "It is about what you are willing to give." Aelric's grip tightened on his sword, but he couldn't shake the feeling that steel would be useless against whatever this was. He swallowed hard, his mind racing. "I came for my father," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "He crossed these gates years ago. I need to know what happened to him." The figure paused, and for the first time, Aelric thought he saw a glimmer of something human in its shadowed form. "Your father sought the same thing," the voice said softly, "but he did not understand the cost." Aelric's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" he asked, his heart pounding in his chest. The mist swirled violently now, the air thick with an unseen force. "This place," the voice whispered, "it is not just a gateway. It is a choice, a path that few can walk and fewer still can leave. Your father is part of the story now, as will you be if you continue." Elric's mind reeled. He hadn't come this far to turn back, but the weight of those words hung heavy in the air. He could feel the truth in them, the undeniable sense that once he stepped fully into this world, there would be no return. And yet, something inside him refused to back down. The figure, sensing his resolve, moved closer. "So, Aelric," the voice whispered, "are you willing to pay the price for the truth?" Elric's breath caught in his throat, his heart pounding in his chest. The mists thickened around him, and the path ahead was cloaked in shadows. He knew, without a doubt, that his next step would change everything. But the truth had never been so close. Aelric stood frozen, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a suffocating force. The figure loomed closer, its presence more tangible now, though still obscured by the ever-shifting mist. The air felt thick, as if time itself was bending around him, urging him to move, to step forward, to make his choice. But Elric's thoughts were on his father. His father had stood here, at this very threshold, and crossed into the unknown. Had he been given the same choice? Had he, too, hesitated, wondering if the truth was worth the risk? The idea twisted in Elric's mind, feeding his fear but also stoking his determination. He had to know what had become of him, even if it meant facing whatever nightmare lay ahead. "Yes," Aelric finally whispered, his voice breaking through the thick silence. "I'll pay the price." As soon as the words left his mouth, the ground beneath him trembled, a low rumble reverberating through the air. The mist swirled violently, and for a moment, the figure before him vanished, leaving only the sound of that haunting melody echoing in his ears. But then the mist parted, revealing a path that stretched far beyond what he could see, its edges lined with faint, glowing lights that pulsed rhythmically, as if in time with his own heartbeat. Aelric took a deep breath and stepped forward. The ground felt strange beneath his boots, soft yet solid, almost as if the path was alive, shifting and breathing with each step he took. The air grew colder, but there was something else now, a presence watching him, waiting for his next move. The figure had disappeared, but Aelric knew it hadn't gone far. He walked on, the path narrowing as the mist grew thicker around him. The lights on the edges flickered, and for brief moments, Aelric thought he saw images in the mist, shadows of figures moving just beyond his sight, their forms blurred and indistinct. He tried to focus, but every time he thought he recognized something, it slipped away, leaving only the vague impression of faces, of shapes shifting in and out of existence. Then, without warning, the mist cleared, and Aelric found himself standing before a massive stone altar. It was ancient, weathered by time, with strange carvings etched into its surface, symbols he had seen in his father's journals. His pulse quickened. This was it, the place his father had written about, the heart of Eldoria. But something was wrong. The air around the altar was heavy with a strange, oppressive energy, and Aelric could feel it pressing down on him, sapping his strength. He stepped closer, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch the carvings. The moment his fingers brushed the stone, a searing pain shot through his body, forcing him to pull back with a gasp. "You seek what should not be found." The voice echoed through the clearing, cold and sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. Aelric spun around, his heart racing. The figure had returned, but now it was no longer cloaked in shadow. It stood before him, tall and imposing, its face hidden beneath a hood, but its presence undeniable. "What are you?" Aelric demanded, his voice trembling. The figure didn't move, but the air around it seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "I am the keeper of this place," it said, its voice reverberating through the clearing. "I guard the secrets that lie beyond the gates, the truths that mortals are not meant to know." Elric's mind raced, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I came here for answers," he said, his voice steady. "I came here for my father." The figure remained silent for a moment, then took a step closer. "Your father sought the same truths you seek now," it said. "He too was drawn to the mysteries of Eldoria. But the price he paid was far greater than he understood." Elric's blood ran cold. "What happened to him?" he demanded. The figure tilted its head, as if considering his question. "He became part of the story," it said softly. "Just as you will, if you continue down this path." Elric's heart pounded in his chest. "What does that mean?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, it raised a hand, and the air around the altar began to shimmer. Slowly, the stone surface rippled, and from the center of the altar, a shape began to emerge, a small, glowing object pulsating with a strange, otherworldly light. Elric stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. It was a key, but not just any key. This was the key his father had written about, the one that was said to unlock the final secret of Eldoria, the key to the truth. But as Elric reached out to grasp it, the figure spoke again, its voice low and filled with warning. "Once you take this key," it said, "there is no turning back. You will be bound to this place, to its secrets. The choice is yours, Elric. But know this, the truth is not always what it seems." Elric hesitated, his hand hovering above the key. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, and for the first time, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. But the thought of his father, lost somewhere within the labyrinth of Eldoria's mysteries, drove him forward. He had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, Elric grabbed the key. The moment his fingers wrapped around it, the world around him erupted in light. The moment Elric's hand closed around the key, a shockwave of energy rippled through the air, knocking him back. He stumbled, catching himself just before falling to the ground. As the light intensified, blinding and cold, the key pulsed in his hand, warm to the touch, as if alive. A ringing sound filled his ears, rising in intensity until it was all he could hear, drowning out everything else. The ground beneath him trembled, and the mist that had once clung to the path like a shroud began to swirl violently, twisting into shapes that blurred the edges of reality. His vision flickered, like the world around him was unraveling, and then, in a flash, the light faded. The key had vanished. Elric gasped, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the sudden dimness. The clearing was silent again, but it wasn't the same. The altar was no longer just a stone monolith. It was alive with power, the carvings glowing faintly with the same otherworldly light that had engulfed him moments before. But something else had changed. The oppressive weight that had hung in the air was gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating stillness. And the figure, the one who had spoken to him, was nowhere to be seen. Elric's hand trembled as he looked down at where the key had been. It had vanished the instant he touched it, yet he could still feel its presence, as if it had fused with him, become part of him. His heart raced. What had he just done? Before he could make sense of it, the ground beneath his feet shifted again. But this time it wasn't a subtle tremor. It was violent, like the earth was cracking open beneath him. He staggered back, glancing around in panic as the altar began to splinter, the stone surface fracturing with jagged cracks that spread like wildfire. From those cracks, a dark, shimmering substance seeped out, spilling across the ground in thick, inky streams. It looked like liquid shadow, swirling with faint lights, like stars trapped in a void. The voice returned, but this time it wasn't the cold, distant voice of the figure. It was deeper, darker, and it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You've unlocked what was meant to remain sealed." Elric's breath caught in his throat. Who are you?" he shouted, spinning around, his pulse hammering in his ears. But there was no one there, just the darkness spilling from the altar, creeping toward him like a living thing. "You are the key now," the voice boomed, echoing through the clearing, vibrating in his very bones. "And the gate has been opened." Suddenly, the mist swirled violently again, and from within it, shadows began to form. Not the figure he had seen before, but something else, multiple shapes, dark and indistinct, moving toward him with unnatural speed. Elric's heart pounded as he unsheathed his sword, gripping it tightly as the shadows advanced. They didn't make a sound, but their presence was suffocating, like a wave of cold dread washing over him. The first shadow lunged at him, and Elric swung his sword, the blade cutting through the air. But it passed through the shadow like it was nothing more than smoke. The shadow recoiled, twisting and reforming, but another one darted forward, and then another. Elric's breathing grew ragged as he slashed wildly, each time missing, his blade finding no solid form to strike. Panic clawed at the edges of his mind. How could he fight something he couldn't touch? The voice came again, louder this time, shaking the very ground beneath him. "You cannot fight what you have summoned, mortal. The gate is open, and now the guardians come for you." Elric's mind raced. He had no idea what he had summoned, or how to stop it. The shadows were closing in, their forms twisting and writhing like nightmares given life. He backed away, his sword useless in his hand, as they surrounded him, their dark shapes blurring into one another, forming an impenetrable wall of darkness. Just as the shadows closed in, something strange happened. The key's presence, faint but undeniable, stirred within him. It was as though it was trying to communicate, a pulse of energy from deep inside his chest. Without thinking, Elric placed his hand over his heart, where he felt the key's pulse the strongest. The moment his hand touched his chest, a shockwave of light erupted from him, brilliant and blinding, scattering the shadows. The mist rolled back violently as the shadows retreated, dissolving into the air. The clearing fell silent once more, but Elric knew the danger hadn't passed. He could still feel the dark energy pulsing beneath the surface, waiting, watching. But there was something else. A path. It had appeared in the aftermath of the light, leading away from the altar, deeper into the unknown. Elric hesitated, his pulse still racing, but he knew he had no choice. The key had changed something fundamental inside him, and now there was no turning back. The gate had been opened, and whatever lay ahead was now tied to him, bound to his fate. Steeling himself, Elric took the first step onto the path, the ground shifting beneath his feet like sand, and began to walk into the unknown, his heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. The further he went, the more the world behind him seemed to fade, swallowed by the mist and the shadows he had left behind. The path twisted and turned, the light dimming with every step, until he was walking in near darkness. But there, in the distance, something glowed faintly, a light, far ahead, beckoning him deeper into the heart of Eldoria. Elric pressed forward, the faint glow ahead pulling him deeper into the labyrinth of shifting mist and shadow. Each step felt like he was walking on the edge of two worlds, the ground beneath him barely solid, the air thick with unseen eyes. His senses were heightened, and though he could still feel the pulse of the key within him, it offered no comfort. If anything, it seemed to thrum with increasing urgency, as if it knew what awaited him in the darkness ahead. The path twisted sharply, leading him through towering stone pillars, each one etched with the same strange symbols he had seen on the altar. The carvings glowed faintly, their light flickering like dying embers, casting long, shifting shadows across the narrow way. Elric couldn't shake the feeling that the pillars were watching him, like silent sentinels standing guard over a forgotten secret. As he moved deeper, the air grew colder, and the faint glow he had seen in the distance now flickered like a flame caught in the wind. It was closer now, but as it came into focus, Elric's steps faltered. The light wasn't what he had thought. Ahead, in the center of a vast clearing, stood a massive stone gate, its surface shimmering with the same eerie light as the one he had seen when he first crossed into Eldoria. But this gate was different. It was larger, more imposing, its surface covered in even more intricate carvings, symbols he could almost recognize now, though their meaning remained just out of reach. and in front of the gate, bathed in the shimmering glow, was another figure. This one was different from the shadowy forms that had attacked him earlier. It stood tall and still, cloaked in dark robes that seemed to ripple with the light of the gate behind it. Its face was obscured by a deep hood, but even from a distance, Aelric could feel its gaze on him, piercing, ancient, and far more dangerous than anything he had encountered so far. Aelric's heart raced as he gripped the hilt of his sword, though he knew it would likely be useless. The figure hadn't moved, but its presence was overwhelming, filling the clearing with a suffocating weight. Aelric could feel the key inside him reacting, its pulse quickening in rhythm with his own heartbeat, as if urging him forward, and yet warning him at the same time. The figure spoke, its voice low and resonant, carrying a power that made the very air vibrate. "You have come far, Aelric," it said, the sound echoing unnaturally in the clearing. "But you do not understand what you seek." Aelric took a cautious step forward, his breath visible in the cold air. "I seek the truth," he said, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his insides. "The truth about my father. About this place." The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering his words. "Your father sought the same," it said. "But the truth is not what you expect. It is not a single answer, but a choice that will bind you to this place as it bound him." Aelric's blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" he asked, taking another step forward, though every instinct screamed at him to turn back. The figure remained still, but the gate behind it began to pulse with light, the symbols on its surface glowing brighter. "Your father chose to enter the gate," the figure said. "He sought to unravel the mysteries of Eldoria, to uncover what lies beyond the veil of time. But the price for such knowledge is eternal." Aelric's heart pounded in his chest. His father had crossed this very threshold. But why hadn't he returned? What had happened to him? The figure extended a hand toward the gate, its long, pale fingers shimmering in the light. "He is beyond the gates now," it said, its voice soft but filled with finality. "He has become part of Eldoria's story, as you will, if you choose to follow him." Aelric's mind raced. He had come so far, and now the truth was within his grasp. But the figure's words hung in the air like a warning. Was this the fate that awaited him? To be swallowed by the mysteries of Eldoria, lost in its endless labyrinth of time and shadow? The key inside him pulsed again, more urgently now, as if it was calling to the gate, to the power that lay beyond it. Aelric could feel it pulling him forward, drawing him closer to the shimmering light that beckoned him toward the unknown. But at what cost? He stepped closer to the figure, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of fear and confusion swirling inside him. "If I cross the gate," he asked, "will I ever return?" The figure was silent for a long moment, and when it spoke again, its voice was almost a whisper. "No one who enters the gate returns unchanged," it said. "Your father became one with Eldoria, as you will if you step through." Aelric's breath caught in his throat. The choice before him was clear, but its consequences were shrouded in mystery, and the weight of it pressed down on him with crushing force. He could turn back now, leave Eldoria behind, and never know what had happened to his father. Or he could cross the gate and risk losing himself in the process. His hand trembled as he reached for the key that now pulsed beneath his skin, its presence both comforting and terrifying. He could feel the power of it coursing through him, urging him to take the next step, to unlock the final secret of Eldoria. Aelric took a deep breath, his heart racing, and stepped forward. The gate loomed before him, its light brighter than ever, and as he reached out to touch it, the ground beneath him trembled once more, the air around him thick with a strange, otherworldly energy. The figure watched him in silence, its gaze piercing through the veil of light and shadow. "The choice is yours," it said softly. "But once you cross, there is no return." Aelric's hand hovered over the shimmering surface of the gate, his fate hanging in the balance. The gate pulsed with a rhythmic hum, its glow intensifying, and the air around him buzzed with anticipation. Aelric's hand trembled as it hovered inches from the shimmering surface of the gate, the warmth of the pulsating energy radiating from it brushing his fingertips. His heart pounded, each beat louder than the last, drowning out the voice of reason in his mind. The gate seemed to be calling him, pulling him into its depths, and yet the words of the figure still echoed in his thoughts. Once you cross, there is no return. He glanced back over his shoulder, the path he had taken now swallowed by the mist, the shadows lurking just beyond his sight. There was no going back, not after all he had seen, not after coming this far. His father had crossed this threshold, and if he didn't do the same, he would never know what had happened to him. The key pulsed within his chest, its rhythm now perfectly in sync with the hum of the gate. Steeling himself, Aelric pushed his hand forward, and as soon as his fingers brushed the surface of the gate, a sharp, icy sensation shot through his arm, traveling up to his shoulder and into his core. The light from the gate flared violently, blinding him, and the ground seemed to drop away beneath his feet. For a moment, he felt as though he were falling through endless space, his body weightless, suspended in a void of light and shadow. But then, with a sudden jolt, the sensation stopped. The light dimmed, and Aelric found himself standing on solid ground again. He blinked, his vision slowly adjusting to the dim surroundings. The gate was gone, as was the figure that had guarded it. In its place was a vast, open expanse, stretching out in every direction. The mist was gone, replaced by a starless, inky sky that seemed to press down on him with a suffocating weight. Aelric looked around, his breath catching in his throat. The landscape was barren, desolate, the ground cracked and dry as if it hadn't seen rain in centuries. Strange, jagged formations jutted up from the earth like the bones of a long-dead giant, casting long, twisted shadows in the dim light. In the distance, he could see what looked like ruins, ancient structures, half buried in the earth, their edges worn smooth by time. There was no sound, no wind, no movement. The silence was absolute. He took a hesitant step forward, the ground crunching beneath his boots. Despite the oppressive silence, Aelric could feel the key's presence stronger than ever, pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, guiding him forward. But where was he? Was this the realm beyond the gate his father had written about? And more importantly, was his father still here? As he walked, the ground beneath him seemed to shift subtly, like it was alive. The air felt heavier with each step, and Aelric couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. But by what? There were no shadows here, no lurking figures, only the ruins, the strange, lifeless landscape, and the sky that seemed to swallow all light. Then, far ahead, something caught his eye. A single flicker of light, faint and distant, glimmering in the darkness. Aelric's breath quickened. It was the first sign of life he had seen in this strange, desolate place, and without hesitation, he moved toward it. The closer he got, the more the light grew, until he could make out the outline of a structure, a large, crumbling tower that stood alone in the middle of the wasteland. The light flickered from its topmost window, like a beacon calling him forward. As Aelric approached the tower, a strange feeling settled over him, a sense of familiarity, like he had seen this place before, though he couldn't recall when. The door to the tower was half open, creaking softly as it swayed in the still air. Without thinking, Aelric stepped inside. The interior of the tower was dark and cold, the stone walls worn smooth by age. He could hear the faint echo of his footsteps as he climbed the spiral staircase that wound up toward the light. His hand grazed the rough stone of the banister as he ascended, the weight of anticipation growing heavier with each step. At the top of the stairs, the light grew brighter, spilling out from an open doorway. Aelric hesitated for a moment, his pulse quickening. The key pulsed again, stronger than ever, as if urging him onward. He took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway. The room at the top of the tower was small, cluttered with old books and strange, archaic instruments scattered across tables and shelves. In the center of the room stood a large, weathered desk, and behind it, a figure. Aelric froze. The figure was hunched over the desk, its back to him, but there was something about it, something unmistakable. His breath caught in his throat. "Father," he whispered, his voice barely audible in the stillness. The figure didn't move at first. Then, slowly, it turned. Elric's heart raced as he saw the man's face, aged, worn, but unmistakably his father's. But there was something wrong. His eyes, once filled with warmth and life, were cold, distant, as if he were staring through Aelric rather than at him. "Father." Aelric took a step forward, but the man raised a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "You shouldn't have come here," his father said, his voice hoarse, filled with regret. "I tried to warn you." Elric's mind reeled. He had found him. After all this time, after all the searching, he had found his father. But the words didn't make sense. "Warn me? About what?" he asked, confusion lacing his words. His father's gaze shifted, and for a moment, Elric saw a flicker of something. Fear, perhaps, before his expression hardened again. The gate, it was never meant to be opened. Now it's too late. He looked down at his hands, and Aelric noticed, for the first time, that they were shaking. "I'm bound to this place, and so are you." Elric's heart pounded in his chest. "What do you mean?" he demanded, stepping closer. "I came here to find you, to bring you back." His father shook his head. "There is no going back. Eldoria is not a place you can escape. It is a story, and now you are part of it." Elric's mind raced as his father's words hung heavy in the air. Part of the story? The phrase gnawed at him, its meaning elusive and unsettling. He had come so far, braved unimaginable dangers, and now, standing before the man he had spent years searching for, the truth seemed more distant than ever. His father's hands trembled as he backed away from the desk, his eyes reflecting a weariness that went beyond age. It was the weight of knowledge, of something Aelric couldn't yet grasp. His once strong frame now seemed frail, like a man hollowed out by time. "Eldoria doesn't let go." "Aelric," his father said softly, his voice tinged with both sadness and warning. "It's not just a place, it's alive. It weaves itself into you. You can't simply leave once you've crossed the threshold." Aelric took a step closer, his pulse quickening. "But you're here, you're alive. There must be a way to escape, to—" "No." His father cut him off, his voice sharp with finality. "I tried, just as you will. But this world, this story, it consumes everything. It changes you, rewrites you. You become part of the tale, and every choice you make ties you deeper into its web." He looked up, his gaze piercing through the dim light of the tower. "I am not the man you once knew. I've been here too long. I'm part of this now." Aelric clenched his fists, his mind swirling with anger and confusion. "I don't believe that. There has to be a way out. Some kind of key, something." "The key you carry," his father interrupted, his eyes shifting toward Elric's chest. "It's not a way out. It's a binding. It ties you to this place even tighter than you realize." Elric's hand instinctively went to the spot where he had felt the key's pulse within him, now cold and still. His heart sank as realization began to dawn. The key, it hadn't been a tool to unlock his freedom. It had been a trap, a link to the very thing he had been trying to escape. His father sighed, the weight of years pressing down on his thin shoulders. "You think I didn't search for answers? That I didn't try to find a way to break free? Eldoria shows you what you want to see. It gives you hope, only to tighten its grip. It's the nature of the tale. And now, you've stepped into it, just like I did." Aelric shook his head, refusing to accept it. He had come too far, risked too much, to let this be the end. "No," he muttered, his voice firm. "There has to be something we're missing. A way to turn the key, to use it in a different way." His father's expression softened, a trace of sorrow lining his features. "I used to think the same, but every door you open leads to another one. There's always another mystery, another path. It never ends." Elric's frustration boiled over. Then why stay here? Why continue living in this nightmare if there's no way out? His father's gaze darkened, and for the first time, a flicker of something deeper, something far more terrifying, crept into his eyes. "Because the alternative," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "is far worse." The room seemed to grow colder, the air thickening with tension. Aelric frowned, taking a step back. "Worse? What are you talking about?" His father's hands clenched at his sides, his knuckles white. "The gate. It wasn't meant to be crossed. It wasn't meant to be opened, not by us. I didn't understand it at first, but now I see. Beyond the gate, there are things, beings, that don't belong in our world. They watch, they wait, and once you enter their realm, they take notice. They begin to feed off of you. Your thoughts, your memories, your very soul. That's what Eldoria is, Aelric. It's a living, breathing story, written by forces far older than we can comprehend. And we are just its characters. Aelric's blood ran cold. The shadows that had attacked him earlier, the strange figure at the gate, the overwhelming sense of being watched. It all made sense now. But it wasn't a sense of understanding that settled over him. It was dread. He felt trapped, cornered by the weight of a truth too monstrous to fully grasp. Is that what happened to you? Aelric asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Are you one of them now? His father's eyes flickered with something he hadn't seen before. Guilt, or perhaps regret. I've been here too long, he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. I don't know how much of me is still me. But I know this. The longer you stay, the more you forget. Pieces of you slip away, become part of the story. The people you love, the life you knew. It all fades. And soon, you're nothing more than another piece in the puzzle. Aelric's breath hitched, his mind grappling with the enormity of it all. The key, the gate, Eldoria. It was a prison, a labyrinth designed not just to trap him, but to consume him. He had come looking for answers, for the truth about his father, but what he had found was far darker than he could have ever imagined. But even now, even standing on the precipice of this horrifying realization, something inside Aelric refused to give up. He wasn't just a pawn in some ancient story. He still had choices, still had the will to fight. Then I'll fight it, he said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. I won't let this place take me, and I won't let it take you either. His father's gaze softened, but the sadness never left his eyes. I hope you're right, he said quietly, his voice filled with a weariness that only decades of being trapped could produce. But Eldoria has already written our fates. Aelric stepped closer, determination burning in his chest. Then we'll rewrite it. But as those words left his lips, the tower shook violently, the walls trembling as if the very fabric of reality was starting to tear. The light in the room flickered, and Aelric could feel a dark presence growing, something ancient and malevolent rising from the depths. The air became heavy, and a low, guttural sound echoed through the tower, a sound that sent a chill down his spine. His father's face paled. It knows you're here, he whispered, his voice filled with dread. The gatekeeper. It's coming. Aelric turned toward the window, where the shimmering light had once flickered like a distant star, now replaced by an ominous, swirling darkness. Something moved within it, something vast and formless, watching them both from the other side. The key inside Aelric throbbed painfully, as if reacting to the growing presence. The air crackled with energy, and for the first time since entering Eldoria, Aelric felt truly afraid. Whatever was coming, it wasn't just watching anymore. It was reaching for them. Aelric's pulse quickened as the tower shook more violently. The dark presence in the swirling abyss outside was no longer a distant threat. It was tangible, pressing in on them like an invisible force, suffocating in its intensity. His father's face twisted with fear, something Aelric had never seen before in the man who had once been his unshakable anchor. The sheer terror in his eyes was enough to confirm that this was no ordinary danger. The room around them began to darken as if the walls themselves were absorbing the faint light, closing in on them both. Aelric's body tensed. His instincts screamed at him to run, but where would he go? The tower felt like a cage now, and outside the window, the darkness pulsed and seethed, as if alive. What is it? Aelric demanded, his voice harsh with fear and confusion. What's coming? His father's hands trembled as he stumbled backward, away from the window and the rising dark. The gatekeeper. It's the guardian of Eldoria, a being older than time itself. It controls the gate, the realms, and now, it's aware of you. His voice broke. You've upset the balance, Aelric. You weren't supposed to come here. But I did. Aelric interrupted, gripping his father's arm, shaking him as the tower creaked ominously. "And I won't let this thing take us. We have to do something." His father's gaze wavered, flickering between desperation and resignation. "There is no escape. The gatekeeper, it won't stop. It can't. You've become part of the story now, part of its story. It feeds on us. Our memories, our emotions. It draws us deeper until we're nothing more than echoes in the shadows. And once it starts, once it notices you," his father's voice faltered, eyes widening as a deep, resonant sound echoed from the depths of the dark abyss outside. It wasn't just a noise. It was a feeling, a vibration that rattled the air and seeped into Aelric's bones. For a moment, everything stilled, as though the world held its breath. The oppressive silence was deafening. Then, without warning, the tower split apart. The stones groaned and cracked, shattering like glass as an immense force ripped through them, tearing at the walls and sending debris hurtling into the air. Aelric was thrown backward, his body slamming into the floor as the world around him collapsed. His vision blurred, the ground shaking beneath him. He could hear the roar of wind, the shattering of stone, and something else, something darker, more primal, like the growl of a beast waking from an age-old slumber. Through the haze, he saw his father standing in the center of the room, unmoving, staring up at the gaping void that had opened in the tower. The swirling darkness had grown, coiling like a living storm, tendrils of shadow reaching down toward them. It was no longer just a presence. It was a form, vast and unknowable, its outline barely perceptible against the chaos. Aelric's heart froze as he realized that it was coming for them. He scrambled to his feet, adrenaline coursing through him, but his father didn't move. "Father!" Aelric shouted, his voice hoarse, reaching out to grab him. "We have to go." His father turned to him, but there was a strange calmness in his eyes now, a resignation that chilled Aelric to the core. "No, Aelric," he said softly, his voice barely audible over the roaring wind. "It's too late. I've been part of this world for too long. You can still fight it, but I can't." "No." Aelric's voice broke. "I'm not leaving you behind." But his father only shook his head. "You have to. It's the only way. You still have time. You can still break free. But you must run." The darkness loomed closer, the very air crackling with energy. Aelric could feel it drawing near, the pressure growing, pressing down on him, on both of them. His father took a step back toward the center of the room, his face set with grim determination. "Go, Aelric, while you still can." Before Aelric could react, his father raised his hand, and the key in Aelric's chest flared to life. A searing pain shot through him as the key burned, its power awakening with a force that nearly knocked him off his feet. He gasped, clutching his chest as the pain intensified, but his father's voice cut through the agony. "The key, it's still your link. It can still get you out. But you have to let me go." Tears blurred Aelric's vision. "No, I can't leave you. Not after everything." "You must," his father said firmly, stepping further into the center of the storm. "It's the only way to stop it from taking you too." The shadows writhed, reaching for him, twisting and curling like serpents. Aelric felt his heart tear in two, torn between the desire to save his father and the grim reality of the situation. His father was already part of Eldoria, already claimed by its dark tale. But Aelric, he could still escape. A sudden burst of light exploded from the key in his chest, and Aelric felt the ground shift beneath him. The force was pulling him, dragging him away from the collapsing tower, away from his father. The shadows screamed, the darkness clawing at him as the light enveloped him. But he held on to his father's final words. "Go," his father's voice rang out, and with one last agonizing look, Aelric let the light consume him. Everything went white, the roaring of the storm fading into silence, and then nothing. Aelric's consciousness floated in the void, suspended between worlds, weightless and lost. The searing pain in his chest had vanished, replaced by an eerie stillness. His mind swirled with fragmented memories. His father's face, the swirling shadows, the tower crumbling around them. But now, all of it seemed distant, like echoes fading into the darkness. Slowly, His senses began to return, though not fully. He wasn't sure where he was, or if he had truly escaped the horrors of Eldoria. His body felt strange, disconnected, as if it no longer belonged to him. The overwhelming silence gnawed at his thoughts, pressing in on his sanity. He opened his eyes, or tried to, but found nothing but blackness staring back at him. The only sound was the faint, rhythmic pounding of his heartbeat, a reminder that he was still alive, though he wasn't sure how or why. Then, like a ripple through the dark, he felt something stir. The space around him shifted subtly, as though the void itself was alive and aware of his presence. Aelric's pulse quickened. Was he truly free from Eldoria, or had he fallen deeper into its clutches? He tried to move, to feel the ground beneath his feet, but there was no ground. No up, no down. Only endless, suffocating black. Out of the void came a voice, faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. It was distant, but unmistakably familiar. Aelric. His breath caught in his throat. The voice, it was his father. He spun around, searching the nothingness for any sign of him, but there was only emptiness. "Father," he called out, his voice shaking. "Where are you?" "Aelric." The voice was closer now, and it wasn't just his father's. It was many voices, layered over each other, speaking his name with a strange, haunting harmony. "You can't escape." Fear gripped him as the voices grew louder, surrounding him from every direction. They echoed endlessly, repeating his name over and over, like a chant, a warning. The void pulsed with energy, the air crackling as if reality itself was bending, distorting. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, a faint silhouette, barely visible against the black. It was his father. Aelric's heart leapt as he stepped forward, reaching out toward the shadowy form. "Father, I'm here. What happened? Where am I?" But the figure didn't move. It simply stood there, its edges flickering and shifting, as if it wasn't fully real. Aelric froze, an unsettling chill creeping down his spine. Something was wrong. As he stared, the figure began to change, morphing before his eyes. His father's face melted away, replaced by a different one, twisted, grotesque, a parody of what had once been human. The eyes were hollow, dark voids that seemed to stare straight through Aelric, and the mouth stretched into an unnatural, cruel smile. "You can't run from the story, Aelric," the figure rasped, its voice a mockery of his father's. "It has already written you." Aelric stumbled back, horror clawing at his mind. The figure wasn't his father. It wasn't even human. It was something else, something from the dark depths of Eldoria, a creature born of the shadows and the twisting, ancient tale that bound them all. He had seen its kind before, lurking at the edges of the gate. But this was different. This was personal. "You're lying," Aelric shouted, his voice shaking. "I escaped. I'm not part of this world." The figure's smile widened, grotesque and mocking. "Escaped?" It hissed, taking a step closer. "No one escapes Eldoria. Not truly. You carry it with you now? Don't you feel it?" Its hand reached out, pointing directly at Aelric's chest, where the key had once burned with life. "It's in you, Aelric. The story is part of you now. You will never be free." A cold dread settled in the pit of Aelric's stomach. He instinctively touched his chest, and for the first time since waking in the void, he felt it, a faint, pulsing energy buried deep within him. The key. It was still there, still connected to Eldoria, still part of the twisted narrative that had ensnared him. "No," he whispered, shaking his head in denial. "This isn't real. You're not real." The figure's eyes gleamed with malice. "Oh, it's very real, Aelric. And you've already begun to change. Haven't you noticed?" It circled him slowly, like a predator toying with its prey. "You're forgetting, aren't you? Little pieces of who you were, slipping away. Your past, your memories. Eldoria is erasing them, rewriting you as it sees fit." Aelric's heart pounded in his chest as the figure's words sank in. It was right. He had been forgetting small things at first. Faces, places, the names of people he once knew, the details of a life that now felt distant and hazy. His memories were unraveling, bit by bit, and in their place, there was only Eldoria. Desperation clawed at him. He couldn't let it happen. He couldn't let Eldoria take him, not like this. He had to fight it, had to find a way to break free. But how? The key was bound to him. The shadows of Eldoria still clung to him, and the void seemed to stretch on forever. The figure stopped in front of him, leaning in close, its breath cold and rancid. "You can fight it all you want," it whispered, "but in the end, you'll become just like the rest of us." A shadow, an echo, nothing more than a ghost in the story. Aelric clenched his fists, his mind racing. There had to be something he could do, some way to resist. He wasn't like his father. He hadn't been in Eldoria for decades. He still had time. He still had will. And the key, it wasn't just a trap, was it? There had to be more to it, something that could help him. Suddenly, a spark of realization flickered in his mind. The key wasn't just a lock, it was a source of power. It had opened the gate, had bound him to Eldoria, but maybe it could also be the key to his freedom. If he could learn to control it, harness its energy, maybe he could break the cycle, rewrite his own fate. He took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of strength left in him, and focused on the pulsing energy in his chest. The figure's mocking laughter filled the void as Aelric closed his eyes, blocking out the darkness, the fear, the doubts. He could feel the key's power, dormant but still there, waiting to be awakened. "You can't win," the figure snarled, its voice growing more distorted, more monstrous. "You belong to Eldoria now." Aelric ignored it, his mind reaching deeper, searching for the connection between himself and the key. He felt the power stirring, responding to his will. It was faint, but it was there. And as he concentrated, the darkness around him began to ripple, the void trembling as if reacting to his defiance. The figure's laughter turned into a hiss of anger. "What are you doing?" it demanded, its voice losing its mocking edge. "Stop." But Aelric didn't stop. He couldn't. He wouldn't. The power surged, and with it came a flicker of light, small at first, but growing brighter, pushing back the shadows. The void around him began to crack, like the surface of a shattered mirror, and the darkness screamed in fury. Aelric opened his eyes, his heart pounding with newfound resolve. "I won't be part of your story," he said, his voice steady. "I'll write my own." The light in Aelric's chest grew brighter, spreading outward like a beacon, forcing the darkness to retreat. The void trembled, shaking under the pressure of his will. The twisted figure that had once mocked him now writhed in agony, its form distorting, as if it were being torn apart by the light. Its hollow eyes locked onto Aelric, filled with rage and fear. "You can't," it shrieked, its voice no longer powerful, but thin and desperate. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll doom us all." Aelric's jaw clenched, his focus sharpening. He didn't care about the creature's warnings anymore. This thing had toyed with him, taunted him, and tried to break his spirit. Now, it was time to fight back. He reached deeper into the pulsing energy within the key, and as he did, he felt something shift. The power wasn't just his to control. It was alive, waiting for him to understand its true purpose. The cracks in the void widened, and the darkness around him twisted violently, as though the very fabric of the space he was in couldn't hold under the strain. The air buzzed with energy, charged with the intensity of the key's awakening. "Stop!" the creature screamed again, its voice frantic. "You don't understand. Eldoria isn't just a place. It's—" Before it could finish, the ground beneath them shattered. There was no sound, no explosion, just a sudden rupture, like the universe itself was splitting apart. The figure was sucked into the rift, vanishing in a flash of black and silver. The darkness that had surrounded Aelric peeled away, unraveling like smoke caught in a gust of wind. And then, everything went silent. Aelric hovered in the void, but now it wasn't oppressive. It was calm, peaceful, even. He could still feel the key's power surging through him, but it was no longer wild and uncontrollable. It was his. He took a deep breath, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the air was fresh, cool, and real. He wasn't sure where he was, but he could feel something solid beneath his feet now, a floor of smooth stone. Slowly, cautiously, he opened his eyes, and the world around him came into focus. He was standing in a vast, open hall, its towering walls adorned with intricate carvings of ancient figures and symbols he didn't recognize. The air was filled with a faint golden light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, casting long shadows across the floor. Ahead of him, at the far end of the hall, was a massive door, shimmering with a soft, ethereal glow. The Shimmering Gates. He knew it instantly. They were far more beautiful and imposing than he had ever imagined. Radiant, carved with runes that pulsed with a rhythm that matched the beat of his heart. This was the gate to Eldoria. But something was different now. The darkness, the corruption that had clung to the gate before, was gone. The way forward was clear. Aelric took a step forward, his footsteps echoing in the grand hall. Every part of him screamed that this was the moment. This was what he had been fighting for. The gate stood before him, and with the key's power coursing through him, he knew he had the strength to open it. But what lay beyond? Freedom? A new world? Or another trap? Another part of Eldoria's twisted design? He paused, doubt creeping in. His father's words echoed in his mind. You've upset the balance, Aelric. You weren't supposed to come here, asterisk. But he had come. And now, standing before the gates, he felt more connected to this world than ever before. The key pulsed gently in his chest, as if urging him forward. But something else stirred too, something deep and ancient, a presence that had been waiting, watching him all along. Suddenly, a voice, familiar, but not the mocking tone of the creature from before. This voice was calm, powerful, and it spoke directly into his mind. Turn back, Aelric. There are things behind these gates that should remain forgotten. To open them is to invite the unknown into every realm. Aelric's blood ran cold. He glanced around, searching for the source of the voice, but the hall was empty. Who are you? He demanded, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Show yourself. The voice didn't respond immediately, but there was a shift in the air. The walls of the hall seemed to ripple, as though reality itself was bending, warping. A figure stepped forward, materializing from the light. A tall, regal woman, draped in robes of shimmering silver and gold. Her face was ageless, her eyes deep pools of wisdom and sorrow. She regarded him with a calm, unwavering gaze. I am the guardian of Eldoria, she said, her voice soft yet commanding. And I have watched you since the moment you stepped into our world. Aelric's heart pounded in his chest. You're the one who's been keeping me here, aren't you? You're the one behind all of this. The guardian shook her head slowly. No, I am not your enemy, Aelric. But I am the protector of what lies beyond these gates. The balance of the realms depends on what stays hidden here. You have touched powers you do not fully understand, and now, you stand at the crossroads. Her words weighed heavily on him. The gate shimmered, so close, yet so dangerous. What's beyond the gates? Aelric asked, his voice barely a whisper. The guardian's expression darkened. Beyond these gates lie the truths of Eldoria, the stories that were never meant to be told. If you open them, you will see. But once they are opened, there is no turning back. Aelric's breath caught in his throat. He stared at the shimmering gate, feeling the pull of the key in his chest. Every instinct told him to open it, to see what lay beyond. But the guardian's warning echoed in his mind, and for the first time, he hesitated. What do I do? Aelric whispered, torn between curiosity and fear. The guardian's gaze softened. The choice is yours. But remember, not all stories are meant to be told. Some doors are better left closed. Aelric stood frozen, his hand hovering near his chest, feeling the pulse of the key as if it had its own heartbeat, beckoning him forward. The shimmering gates loomed ahead, vast and imposing, their radiance almost hypnotic, drawing him in with the promise of forbidden knowledge. Yet the guardian's words echoed through his mind, like a weight pulling him back from the brink. His gaze flicked between the shimmering portal and the woman who now stood before him, ethereal and calm, yet with a solemn warning in her eyes. Her presence was like an anchor, holding him steady amidst the pull of the gates. The key in his chest pulsed more insistently now, as if urging him to move, to ignore the caution, and to embrace the power that awaited beyond. "What happens if I open the gates?" Aelric asked, his voice low and uncertain, though the hunger for answers burned just beneath the surface. The Guardian's eyes flickered with a sadness, a deep sorrow that seemed to span across eons. "If you open the gates," she said softly, "you will uncover truths long buried. But with those truths come consequences. Eldoria is a world built on the stories forgotten by time, the stories that should never have been. Behind those gates lies the heart of it all, everything that has been sealed away for good reason." Elric's mind raced. Was she speaking in riddles to protect the secrets of Eldoria, or was there truly something beyond that should never be unearthed? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he couldn't ignore the pull of the key, its rhythm syncing with the pulse of the gates themselves, like two halves of the same force calling to each other. There was a connection between him and Eldoria, something deeper than just the physical presence of the key. "I didn't come this far just to turn back now," he said, the words slipping out before he had even fully processed them. The Guardian stepped closer, her form gliding silently across the floor, as though she were made of the very light that illuminated the hall. "If you open the gates, Eldoria will awaken fully," she warned, her voice a whisper now, heavy with the weight of the past. "It will not be just your story that is changed. The worlds beyond these halls will feel it. You have already begun to alter things, Aelric. The more you unravel, the harder it becomes to stop." Aelric felt the chill of those words deep in his bones. He knew he had altered something when he had first touched the key, perhaps even before that, when he first laid eyes on the Shimmering Gates. The story had been waiting for him, waiting to draw him into its web, to become a part of it. But how much had he already lost? His memories of the life he had before were fading, slipping through his fingers like grains of sand. Faces, names, even his own past felt distant, as though it belonged to someone else. Yet here he was, standing at the threshold of the unknown, a mere step away from the truth that had been withheld from him. His heart pounded, not from fear but from a deep, unshakable curiosity. The Guardian spoke of consequences, but was it not worth the risk to uncover what lay beyond the gates? Was it not his right to know the full story of Eldoria? "I can't leave without knowing," he said firmly, his resolve solidifying. "Whatever it is behind these gates, I need to see it. I need to understand." The Guardian's expression didn't change, though a flicker of something, perhaps pity, crossed her eyes. She stepped back, giving him space, her hands falling to her sides. "Then you must be prepared for what you will unleash." Aelric took a deep breath, his fingers trembling as he reached for the Shimmering Gates. The runes along the surface began to glow brighter in response to his touch, the key in his chest vibrating in tune with their energy. A soft hum filled the air, growing louder, as if the very fabric of the hall was coming to life. The doors were reacting, responding to him as though they had been waiting for this moment all along. His fingers brushed the surface, and in an instant, a surge of power raced through him. The gates pulsed once, then twice, before they began to shift. The shimmering light grew stronger, enveloping him, and the massive doors started to creak open with a slow, grinding sound. Elric's heart pounded in his chest as a gust of warm, fragrant air spilled through the widening gap, carrying with it a strange, unfamiliar scent, something ancient and forgotten, yet intoxicating in its allure. Beyond the gates, a faint golden light beckoned. Aelric took a hesitant step forward, peering into the widening crack. He could make out the shapes of towering trees, their leaves shimmering like molten gold in the dim light. The ground was covered in soft, misty fog that seemed to glow from within and further in the distance. He could just barely see the outline of a grand structure, something immense, something alive with its own pulse. But there was something else too, something that made his skin prickle with unease. The air was too still, the silence too deep. The beauty beyond the gates was undeniable, but beneath it, there was a weight, a presence that lingered in the shadows, watching, waiting. Aelric hesitated, his hands still resting on the door. The pull was stronger now, more insistent, but so too was the feeling of something darker, lurking just out of sight. He could feel it, something ancient, something vast, and it was aware of him. The guardian's voice came again, quiet but firm. This is your final moment of choice, Aelric. Once you cross the threshold, there is no going back. His heart thundered in his chest, torn between the pull of the unknown and the weight of the guardian's warning. Every instinct screamed at him to stop, to listen, to heed the warning of those who had come before him. But the key was alive in his chest, thrumming with power, and the gates were open now. The story was calling him forward. Aelric's breath caught in his throat as he stepped through the gates, the golden light swallowing him whole. As Aelric crossed the threshold of the Shimmering Gates, a wave of warmth enveloped him, and the world around him transformed in an instant. The air was thick with the sweet scent of blossoms that seemed to pulse with life, and vibrant colors swirled around him, painting a landscape more vivid than anything he had ever encountered. He stepped onto soft, mossy ground, which yielded beneath his feet, and he felt a sense of euphoria that momentarily chased away his doubts. Before him stretched a breathtaking vista, where rolling hills met lush forests that seemed to dance in the gentle breeze. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting playful shadows that darted across the ground. This was Eldoria, a realm alive with magic and mystery. But beneath the beauty, there was an undercurrent of tension, a feeling that something was not right. Aelric moved cautiously, the enchanting scenery almost blinding him to the danger lurking beneath the surface. He could feel the key's power resonating within him, an echo of the energy he had felt at the gates. He sensed that it was both a blessing and a curse, a source of strength, but also a beacon that might draw unwanted attention. As he ventured deeper into Eldoria, he began to notice the strange silence that enveloped the landscape. The vibrant flora swayed gently, yet there were no birds singing, no insects buzzing, nothing to break the eerie stillness. The beauty around him felt like a facade, hiding something sinister just out of sight. His thoughts drifted back to the guardian's warning. The truths behind the gates should remain hidden. Aelric shuddered at the memory but pressed on, driven by a curiosity he could hardly contain. He had to know what lay within this realm, what secrets had been concealed. After walking for what felt like hours, Aelric found himself at the edge of a shimmering lake. Its surface was a mirror, reflecting the sky and trees around it, but there was something unusual about the water. It glimmered with a silvery light, and as he drew closer, he noticed shapes moving beneath the surface, swift, shadowy figures darting just out of reach. The allure of the lake pulled at him, and he knelt at the water's edge, peering into the depths. As he did, the surface rippled, and the water began to swirl, forming a vortex that drew his gaze deeper into the abyss. Visions danced before him, fragments of memories, stories long forgotten. He saw flashes of battles fought, of lost heroes and ancient beings who had walked the lands of Eldoria. Among these images, one stood out, a figure shrouded in darkness, wielding a power that twisted the very essence of the land. Aelric's heart raced. This was the darkness that had threatened to consume Eldoria. It was the same darkness he had sensed before opening the gates. The images grew more chaotic, revealing glimpses of destruction and despair, and he felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him. What had he unleashed by stepping through the gates? Suddenly, the water rippled violently, and a figure erupted from the depths. It was a woman, her hair flowing like liquid silver, eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. She emerged gracefully, standing tall upon the water's surface, as if it were solid ground. "Welcome, Aelric," she said, her voice melodic yet laced with an echo of sorrow. "You are brave to seek the truth of Eldoria, but are you prepared to bear its weight?" Aelric staggered back, momentarily entranced by her beauty, but he shook off the spell that her presence cast over him. "Who are you?" he demanded, trying to steady his voice despite the unease that prickled at his skin. "What are you?" "I am Lyriel, a keeper of the stories that bind this realm," she replied, her gaze piercing through him as if reading the very depths of his soul. "I was drawn to your heart, to the light within you, but I warn you, curiosity comes at a price." He opened his mouth to ask more, but she raised her hand, silencing him. "You have already chosen to confront what lies beyond the gates. but the path ahead is fraught with peril. The darkness you glimpsed is not merely a memory. It is a force that seeks to reclaim this world. It has awakened with your arrival, and now it seeks to consume you as well. The words sank into Aelric, a chilling truth that made his blood run cold. He was not just an observer in this story. He was a player in a much larger game, one that had been set in motion long before his journey began. "What can I do?" Aelric asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "I have to stop it." Lyriel's expression softened, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. "There is a way, but it requires more than just courage. You must seek out the shards of light that were scattered across Eldoria long ago. They hold the power to repel the darkness and restore balance to the realm. Only then can you confront the shadow that threatens us all." Aelric felt a surge of determination. The task seemed monumental, but he had come this far, and he was not about to turn back. "Where do I find these shards?" he asked, ready to embark on this new quest. "The first shard lies in the Whispering Woods, where the trees themselves guard their secrets," Lyriel replied, her voice low and urgent. "But beware, for the shadows lurk there, watching your every move. You will not be alone. Dark creatures have been stirred by your arrival, and they will do everything in their power to stop you." With each word, Elric's heart pounded with anticipation and dread. The Whispering Woods. He had heard tales of its beauty, but also of its dangers, the kind that could ensnare the unwary. He would need to be cautious, clever, and above all, brave. As he steeled himself for the journey ahead, Lyriel extended her hand. A glowing orb appeared above her palm, illuminating the area around them with a soft, golden light. "Take this. It will guide you through the darkness and reveal the path ahead." Aelric reached out, feeling the warmth of the orb as it nestled in his palm, its energy crackling against his skin. The moment he touched it, visions flooded his mind. Snippets of the Whispering Woods, paths winding through ancient trees, and creatures that skulked in the shadows. He could sense their malevolence, the lurking threat that awaited him. "Trust the light, Aelric," Lyriel urged, her voice becoming a whisper in the wind. "It will show you the way, but remember, there will be trials ahead. The darkness will test your resolve." With a nod of determination, Aelric turned from the lake and began his journey into the heart of Eldoria, every step resonating with the promise of adventure and the weight of the challenge ahead. The key throbbed in his chest, a constant reminder of his purpose, while the orb of light pulsed in his hand, illuminating the path that stretched before him. As he entered the forest, the atmosphere shifted. The trees were ancient, their trunks thick and gnarled, with leaves that whispered secrets to one another. Aelric felt the weight of their gaze upon him, as though they were aware of his presence. The air grew thick with tension, and the soft rustle of leaves became a haunting melody that accompanied his every step. But as he moved deeper into the woods, he began to sense the shadows creeping closer, coiling around the trees like serpents. They whispered his name in voices that slithered through the air, taunting him, echoing his fears and insecurities. "Turn back, Aelric. You are not worthy. You cannot face the darkness." The words clawed at his mind, threatening to pull him into despair. Aelric clenched his fists, reminding himself of Lyriel's warning. He was on a mission, one that could save not only Eldoria but perhaps also himself. Drawing a deep breath, he tightened his grip on the orb. A brilliant light erupted from it, cutting through the oppressive darkness that surrounded him. The shadows recoiled, hissing as they were pushed back, but Aelric knew this was only a temporary reprieve. He pressed on, determined to reach the heart of the Whispering Woods, where the first shard awaited. The trees seemed to part, revealing a narrow path ahead, winding deeper into the forest. He followed it, the light from the orb guiding his way, but soon he stumbled upon an eerie clearing bathed in silver moonlight. At its center stood a colossal tree, its bark shimmering like starlight, and Aelric felt an undeniable pull towards it. He approached the ancient tree, feeling an overwhelming sense of reverence. The air around it vibrated with energy, and he knew this was a place of power. Just as he reached out to touch its bark, the shadows surged forward, coalescing into a dark, amorphous shape. "You dare disturb the Ancient One?" It growled, its voice a low rumble that vibrated through the ground. The shadow shifted, forming into a grotesque figure with empty eyes that glowed like embers. "You will not take the shard. You are unworthy, a mere mortal playing with forces beyond your understanding." Elric's heart raced, but he stood his ground. The orb flared in his hand, illuminating the shadow with a blinding light. "I am here to protect this realm," he shouted, his voice steady. "I will not be afraid of you." The shadow writhed, hissing in fury. "Protect? You are but a fool. You cannot comprehend the depths of darkness that dwell here. I will consume you, body and soul." With that, the shadow lunged, and Elric reacted instinctively. He raised the orb high, its light casting away the darkness for just a moment. The shadow recoiled, screeching in pain, but it quickly recovered, swirling around him, seeking to engulf him in its malevolence. Elric's mind raced. He needed to act quickly. Gathering every ounce of courage, he focused on the light emanating from the orb, channeling it into a beam directed straight at the shadow. "I am not afraid," he shouted, determination burning within him. The light struck the shadow, and for an instant it shimmered, revealing a distorted visage of despair. Elric could see the darkness for what it truly was: fear, anger, and pain given form. But he would not back down. He would not let it win. With a surge of energy, he called upon the light, amplifying it until the air crackled with raw power. The shadow screamed, its form breaking apart under the intensity of the brilliance. "No, this is not over," it howled, fading into wisps of darkness. As silence fell over the clearing, Elric stood panting, heart racing. The shadow had retreated, but he knew it would return, stronger and more determined than ever. He turned back to the colossal tree, feeling an overwhelming sense of purpose. He reached out to touch its bark, and as his fingers made contact, a surge of energy shot through him. The ancient tree trembled, and from within its core, a radiant light blossomed. A shard of pure brilliance emerged, hovering before him. Elric grasped the shard, and the moment he did, he felt a rush of knowledge flood his mind. Visions of the past, present, and future intertwined, revealing not just the history of Eldoria but the profound connection he shared with this realm. He was a part of its story, as much as it was a part of his. With the shard in hand, Elric felt a renewed sense of strength. The first step of his quest had been accomplished, but the journey was far from over. The darkness would come again, and he had to prepare for the battles that lay ahead. He turned back toward the path leading deeper into the woods, ready to face whatever came next. As Elric made his way back from the colossal tree, the shard pulsed gently in his hand, its light a beacon against the encroaching shadows. Each step echoed in the stillness of the whispering woods, the vibrant colors around him muted by the weight of the recent battle. Though he had claimed the first shard, the tension in the air remained thick, and he could still feel the shadows lurking just beyond his sight. The path wound ahead, and Elric kept his senses sharp, acutely aware that the dark forces he had just faced were likely not finished with him yet. With each moment, the woods seemed to close in around him, the trees twisting in ways that felt almost sinister. The once serene beauty of Eldoria felt tainted by the knowledge that dark creatures roamed these woods, seeking to snuff out the light he had just claimed. His mind raced as he pondered the next steps. Lyriel had mentioned the shards scattered across Eldoria, each one holding the power to repel the darkness. But the question nagged at him. What had drawn him to this quest in the first place? Was it destiny or mere chance? He could feel the ancient magic coursing through him, yet with it came a deep sense of responsibility, a weight he had not fully understood until now. Suddenly, a rustle broke the silence. Elric's heart raced as he spun around, the light from the shard illuminating the underbrush. The shadows danced ominously, flickering at the edge of his vision. Then, he saw it. A pair of glowing eyes staring back at him from the darkness, watching, waiting. "Show yourself," he commanded, trying to inject strength into his voice, but it came out as more of a challenge than he intended. The eyes blinked, and with a swift movement, a creature emerged from the foliage, a sleek, shadowy figure with iridescent fur and elongated limbs, blending into the darkness. Its body was lithe and agile, and Aelric could sense a primal intelligence behind its emerald eyes. "What are you?" Aelric asked, lowering the shard slightly as curiosity momentarily overcame his fear. The creature tilted its head, and to Elric's surprise, it spoke. "I am Veyra, a guardian of the woods. I have watched you, Aelric, as you have navigated the perils of Eldoria." "Guardian?" Aelric echoed, confused. "I thought guardians were meant to protect the light, not the shadows." "Light and shadow are two sides of the same coin," Veyra replied cryptically. "The darkness you fear can reveal truths you have yet to understand. It can sharpen your resolve and prepare you for the trials ahead. But tread carefully. The line between ally and enemy can blur easily in these woods." Aelric studied the creature, feeling a strange sense of kinship. "I just defeated a shadow that threatened to consume me," he said, recalling the battle he had just faced. "Are you here to aid me or hinder me?" Veyra's expression softened, the glow of its eyes shimmering like starlight. "I am here to guide you, if you allow it. The woods are treacherous, and you will need all the help you can get if you are to find the next shard and confront the darkness that seeks to reclaim Eldoria." With a mixture of relief and skepticism, Aelric nodded. "I accept your help, but how do I find the next shard?" "The path is fraught with danger," Veyra warned, glancing around as if expecting unseen eyes to be watching. "The second shard lies in the heart of shadows, a place where light barely penetrates. You will face illusions and temptations that seek to lead you astray. Trust your instincts, and above all, keep the shard close. It will guide you through the darkness." Aelric felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. He had faced shadows before, but the thought of illusions that could prey on his fears sent a shiver down his spine. Still, he knew he had no choice. He was committed to this journey, and he would do whatever it took to protect Eldoria. "Lead the way," Aelric said, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Veyra nodded, turning to glide ahead into the deeper shadows of the woods, and Aelric followed closely, the shard's light casting long, flickering shadows behind them. The further they ventured, the more the air thickened with anticipation, an electric charge that made the hairs on the back of Aelric's neck stand on end. The landscape shifted subtly. The trees began to loom taller and more twisted, their branches gnarled like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. As they walked, the path grew darker, the light from the shard barely piercing the suffocating shadows. The whispering leaves seemed to conspire, murmurs of voices just out of reach, weaving a tapestry of sound that echoed Aelric's doubts and fears. The shadows around him thickened, taking on forms that danced just beyond the corner of his eye. "Stay focused," Veyra advised, glancing back. "Do not let them distract you." Aelric nodded, forcing himself to focus on the shard and the warm light it radiated. He could feel it guiding him, steering him away from the phantoms that seemed to beckon him into the dark recesses of the woods. As they pressed on, the path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into a labyrinth of shadow and light. Suddenly, a chilling laugh rang through the air, echoing off the trees like a taunt. Aelric froze, the sound reverberating through him. "You think you can conquer the darkness?" The voice sneered, its tone smooth yet dripping with malice. "You're but a flicker in the vastness of night." "Who are you?" Aelric shouted, his voice shaking despite his efforts to sound strong. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a tall, dark silhouette cloaked in flowing robes that seemed to absorb the light around it. Its face was obscured, yet Aelric could feel its gaze piercing through him, searching for weaknesses. "I am known by many names, but here, you may call me Shade," the figure intoned, its voice a low, melodic whisper. "I am the embodiment of fear, doubt, and despair. I feed on the weakness of souls like yours." Aelric clenched the shard, feeling its warmth seep into his skin. "I will not succumb to you," he declared, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "I seek to save Eldoria, not to give in to fear." Shade stepped closer, its presence heavy and suffocating. "Ah, but the truth is a double-edged sword, young Aelric. You cannot fight what is within you. Your heart is frail, and your mind is clouded. I can show you visions of failure, of all that you have lost and will lose again. Aelric felt the air grow heavy with Shade's words, and for a fleeting moment, images of his past flooded his mind. Faces of friends, laughter shared, and a warmth he had thought lost. But he shook his head, forcing himself to stay grounded in the present. I will not let you manipulate me, he shouted defiantly. With a wave of its hand, Shade conjured images from the depths of darkness, terrifying visions of Eldoria consumed by shadows, of people he loved lost to despair. Aelric stumbled back, the images clawing at his heart, threatening to pull him under. No, he cried out, raising the shard high above his head. A blinding light erupted from it, illuminating the darkness and pushing back the shadows that surrounded him. The light revealed the true form of the creature, a writhing mass of darkness and despair that shrank from the brightness. Foolish boy, Shade screeched, its voice filled with rage. You think that light can banish me? I am eternal. Yet as Aelric pressed forward, the light from the shard surged, enveloping him in a protective cocoon. You may be eternal, he declared, his voice steady, but I am not alone. I carry the hopes of Eldoria with me. With that declaration, the light intensified, forming a protective barrier around him, and he felt the presence of Veyra beside him, drawing strength from the same radiant source. The shadows recoiled, hissing and writhing, but Aelric didn't stop. He surged forward, pushing the light against Shade, forcing the darkness to retreat. The laughter turned into a scream, reverberating through the woods as the shadows dissipated, fleeing from the light. Aelric felt a rush of triumph, a spark of hope igniting within him. You are nothing without fear, he shouted, driving the light deeper into the heart of the darkness. And in that moment, he felt the ground tremble beneath him, a resonating echo of the power he had tapped into. The shadows quaked and writhed, losing their grip on the world. The heart of shadows trembled, and Aelric knew that he was not just fighting for himself, but for everyone who had ever faced the darkness and lost. As the last remnants of Shade faded into nothingness, the woods fell silent. Aelric stood amidst the stillness, the shard glowing fiercely in his hand, illuminating the path ahead. But he knew this victory was but a fleeting moment in a much larger battle. The darkness was still out there, lurking, waiting for its chance to strike again. He had taken the first step, but many more lay ahead, each one fraught with peril and uncertainty. With Veyra by his side, Aelric pressed onward, determined to reclaim Eldoria from the shadows that sought to consume it. As they ventured deeper into the heart of shadows, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but also the flickering flame of hope guiding him forward. What awaited him next was unknown, but he was ready to face whatever darkness dared to stand in his way. The story of Eldoria was still unfolding, and he was determined to be its light. The deeper they ventured into the heart of shadows, the more Aelric could feel the weight of the darkness pressing in around him. The light from the shard pulsed steadily, but the shadows seemed to swirl and writhe, almost as if they were alive, seeking to reclaim the ground they had just lost. As the path twisted further into the gloom, the air thickened with an unsettling energy. Whispers filled the silence, echoes of forgotten souls trapped within the shadows, murmuring warnings and regrets. Aelric strained to listen, trying to discern any useful information that might aid him on his journey. Do not be swayed by their words, Veyra advised, glancing over at him, the green glow of its eyes sharp and alert. They are meant to confuse you, to lead you into despair. Aelric nodded, but the whispers clawed at the edges of his mind, promising him visions of glory and power if he would just surrender to the darkness. For a moment, he faltered, the weight of responsibility threatening to crush him. What if he failed? What if he was not strong enough to face the challenges ahead? Focus, he reminded himself, tightening his grip on the shard. I have to keep moving. Suddenly, the whispers shifted, morphing into a single, powerful voice that resonated through the shadows. Aelric, son of Eldoria, do you not see? You have the power to become more than just a protector. You can harness the shadows, bend them to your will. Join us, and you will never be weak again. The voice was intoxicating, weaving a spell of temptation around him. He could feel the allure, a promise of strength that tugged at his heart. He glanced at Veyra, who was watching him intently, its posture tense. "Do not listen to it," Veyra urged, a hint of desperation in its voice. "That is the very essence of darkness trying to ensnare you. Trust in the light and your own strength." With effort, Aelric tore his gaze from the shadows, forcing himself to push forward. He could not allow doubt to seep in. The darkness was clever, twisting truth into deception. As they advanced, the path became less defined, the shadows coalescing into figures that danced just out of reach, taunting him with lost memories of his past. Suddenly, they reached a clearing, and the air crackled with a charged energy. In the center stood a stone pedestal, its surface glimmering with dark crystals that seemed to absorb the light from the shard. Aelric felt an instinctive pull toward it, as if the pedestal were calling to him, promising secrets and power hidden within its depths. "What is this place?" he asked, awe creeping into his voice. "The Nexus of Shadows," Veyra replied, its tone filled with caution. "It is a place of great power, but also great danger. The darkness here is thick, and many who come seeking knowledge are lost forever." Aelric took a hesitant step forward, the shard vibrating in his hand, as if sensing the danger. "I have to see what's inside," he said, his curiosity piqued. "There may be knowledge here that could help us in our quest." Veyra hesitated, its gaze darting around the clearing. "Aelric, be careful. The knowledge gained here comes with a price. The shadows will try to manipulate your desires, to show you what you wish to see. Remember who you are." Nodding, Aelric approached the pedestal, the air growing heavier with each step. As he reached out to touch the cold stone, a shiver coursed through him. The moment his fingers made contact, the crystals began to pulse with a rhythm, echoing his heartbeat, and a rush of energy surged through him. Visions exploded in his mind, fleeting images of his past, moments of joy intertwined with fear and loss. He saw himself as a child, playing in the sunlit meadows, then a young man training with his father, preparing for the responsibilities he never thought he would bear. The visions shifted, transforming into images of Eldoria falling into darkness, the vibrant colors of the land turning to ash, friends and family lost in the chaos. "No," Aelric shouted, shaking his head to dispel the haunting images. But the Nexus tightened its grip on him, the shadows swirling around like a tempest, weaving a web of memories that threatened to drown him. "Aelric," Veyra's voice cut through the darkness. "Focus. Use the light." Drawing on the shard's energy, Aelric channeled it into the pedestal, willing the light to break through the overwhelming darkness. The pulse of the crystals intensified, and the shadows recoiled, hissing like serpents. The darkness writhed, and from it emerged a figure, a dark silhouette that bore a striking resemblance to Aelric himself. The shadowy version of him smiled with a sinister glee, its voice a mocking echo of his own. "You think you can resist, Aelric? You are me, and I am you. Together, we could wield unimaginable power." Aelric felt the cold grip of fear wrap around him, but he pushed back against it. "You are a lie," he shouted. "I am not you. I am more than the darkness." The shadow laughed, a chilling sound that sent tremors through the clearing. "You can deny me, but I will always be a part of you. Embrace your true self." With renewed determination, Aelric summoned the light, drawing it from the shard with every ounce of willpower he possessed. The blinding brilliance expanded, illuminating the clearing and pushing back against the shadows. The shadowy figure shrieked, its form dissolving into a mist of darkness that dissipated into the air. As the clearing flooded with light, the whispers quieted, replaced by a profound stillness. Aelric stood panting, the shard's glow illuminating the way forward. Veyra stepped beside him, its eyes shining with pride. "You resisted the darkness within you. That is no small feat." "I had to believe in myself," Aelric replied, still feeling the adrenaline coursing through him. "But I know this isn't over. The shadows are clever, and I have no doubt they'll return." Veyra nodded solemnly. "The journey ahead will test you further. The next shard lies beyond the borders of the Heart of Shadows, in the abyssal caves. But beware, the shadows will not let you leave easily. They will use everything at their disposal to prevent you from reclaiming what is rightfully yours. With that warning in mind, Aelric took a deep breath, steeling himself for the challenges that lay ahead. The light from the shard pulsed reassuringly in his hand, a reminder of the strength he carried within him. He was ready to face whatever darkness awaited him, to reclaim not just the shards but the hope for Eldoria itself. Together, he and Veyra pressed onward, leaving the nexus of shadows behind and venturing deeper into the unknown, aware that each step brought them closer to the truth, and to the next confrontation with the forces that threatened to engulf their world. As Aelric and Veyra navigated the winding path away from the nexus of shadows, the air shifted again, thickening with an unsettling energy. The whispers that had once tormented him faded into a heavy silence, yet the shadows remained watchful, lurking just beyond the edges of their light. Each step felt like a challenge, a dance on the precipice between hope and despair. They emerged from the heart of shadows, the oppressive darkness giving way to the faintest glimmers of light filtering through a thick canopy of trees. Aelric looked around, sensing a change in the atmosphere. The woods felt alive, yet strangely muted, as if they were holding their breath, waiting for something to unfold. "Do you feel that?" he asked, glancing at Veyra, whose expression mirrored his unease. "Something is not right," Veyra replied, its ears flicking back as it scanned the surroundings. "The shadows seem to be gathering, as if they are aware of our movements." The two moved cautiously, the light from the shard casting elongated shadows on the ground. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a whisper, a voice barely audible but laced with a sense of foreboding. "Aelric! Aelric! Who's there?" Aelric called out, his heart racing. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he tightened his grip on the shard. The wind died down, and an eerie silence followed, but Aelric could still feel the presence of something watching them. "Keep your guard up," he warned Veyra as they pressed on, the path growing narrower and more treacherous. Just ahead, the trees began to thin, revealing a dark, gaping entrance to the abyssal caves, a jagged maw in the earth that seemed to exude a palpable darkness. Aelric's heart sank as he took in the ominous sight. "This is it," he said, a sense of dread creeping in. "The next shard is inside." As they approached, the shadows swirled around the entrance, flickering in and out of sight like restless spirits. The cave's mouth yawned wider, and a soft, almost melodic hum emanated from within, a strange juxtaposition to the oppressive darkness surrounding it. "What is that sound?" Aelric asked, frowning at the conflicting sensations. "It could be a trap," Veyra warned, its gaze fixed on the cave. "Do not let the allure of the sound distract you from your purpose. The shadows will use any means necessary to deceive you." With a deep breath, Aelric nodded and stepped forward, the shard's light illuminating the rocky entrance as they crossed the threshold into the abyssal caves. The moment they entered, the atmosphere shifted again. The melodic hum grew louder, reverberating against the cavern walls, echoing in a haunting symphony that seemed to pull at his very soul. The walls of the cave were slick with moisture, glistening in the light from the shard. As they ventured deeper, the path forked, and the hum seemed to come from both directions. Aelric hesitated, glancing back at Veyra. "Which way do we go?" Veyra listened intently, tilting its head. "I can't tell which is the true path. The shadows could be playing tricks on us. We must choose carefully." Aelric took a moment to think, recalling the shadows' earlier taunts. "We need to follow the sound, but not blindly. We have to remain vigilant." They decided to take the left path, the sound growing ever clearer. As they walked, the cave wall seemed to pulse, the darkness coiling around them like a living entity. The melodic hum turned sinister, twisting into echoes of laughter that danced around them, causing Aelric to shudder. "Stay strong," he murmured, pushing forward. The shard flickered, its light a steady reminder of their purpose. But just as they rounded a bend, the path opened into a vast chamber, and what they saw caused Aelric's heart to drop. In the center of the chamber stood a massive, dark figure, its form shifting and morphing like a storm of shadows. crystals protruded from its body, absorbing the light and adding to its foreboding presence. The figure radiated an aura of power and menace, its glowing eyes fixed directly on them. "Welcome, Aelric," it boomed, its voice a deep resonance that echoed throughout the chamber. "I am Vorith, the Shadow Warden, guardian of the Abyssal Caves. You seek the shard, but you are not ready. You carry the light, yet it is a flicker against the darkness I command." Aelric felt the weight of Vorith's gaze bearing down on him, his heart pounding. "I will not back down," he declared, summoning the light from the shard, which brightened at his command. "I have come too far to turn back now." Vorith's laughter filled the chamber, a deep and chilling sound. "You underestimate the shadows. They are not merely an enemy. They are a part of you. I can show you the truth, Aelric. Join me, and together we can harness this power. You can be more than a mere guardian." The shadows swirled around Aelric and Veyra, closing in like a storm. He could feel the darkness beckoning him, whispering promises of strength and dominion. But deep down, he knew that succumbing to Vorith would mean losing everything he fought for. "I will never join you," Aelric shouted defiantly, channeling all his focus into the shard. The light flared, pushing back against the encroaching shadows. "I fight for Eldoria, for the hope of all who dwell in this realm." Vorith's expression darkened, the shadows around him writhing in anger. "Foolish child, your resolve is admirable, but it is not enough. The darkness will always find a way to consume you." With a swift motion, Vorith unleashed a wave of shadowy tendrils that lunged toward Aelric, each one imbued with a chilling energy that sought to ensnare him. Aelric barely had time to react as he raised the shard, its light forming a barrier that repelled the shadows. But the force was overwhelming. He stumbled back, struggling to maintain his footing against the onslaught. Veyra leaped beside him, its own energy intertwining with the shard's light, creating a protective shield. "We have to fight together," Veyra urged, its voice firm. "Combine your powers." Aelric nodded, their combined light forming a brilliant flash that momentarily blinded Vorith, pushing the tendrils back. But Aelric knew this was just the beginning. The battle was far from over. The shadows regrouped, swirling around the warden as it regained its composure, its eyes blazing with rage. "You think you can defeat me with mere light?" Vorith spat, the shadows around him thickening. "You are naive. The darkness has existed long before you, and it will continue to exist long after you are gone." As the shadows surged forward again, Aelric felt a surge of determination. "I may be one, but I carry the hope of many. Together, we can push back the darkness." He summoned every ounce of courage within him, channeling the light from the shard into a concentrated beam that shot toward Vorith. The energy crackled, illuminating the chamber in a dazzling brilliance. The light struck Vorith, who roared in fury as the shadows writhed and recoiled. But Aelric felt the energy draining from him. The weight of the battle was taking its toll. Vorith, still standing despite the blow, began to gather shadows again, preparing for another attack. "Veyra, we need to find a way to break the warden's hold on this place." Aelric gasped, struggling to keep his focus. "What can we do?" "The shards are connected to the very essence of Eldoria," Veyra explained quickly, its eyes darting around the chamber as the shadows loomed closer. "If we can disrupt the nexus of shadows and reclaim the power it holds, we might weaken Vorith enough to claim the shard." Aelric felt a spark of hope at the suggestion. "Let's do it." He pushed back against the shadows, creating a small opening for them to maneuver. "We need to get to the pedestal." As they fought through the darkness, Vorith unleashed his shadows in a last-ditch effort to reclaim control. Aelric could feel the chilling tendrils brush against him, trying to pull him into their depths, but he refused to yield. "Together!" he shouted, feeling the shard pulsing with energy. "We will reclaim Eldoria." They surged forward, pushing through the shadows until they reached the pedestal at the center of the chamber. The darkness roared around them, but the light from the shard blazed with renewed vigor as Aelric placed his hand on the cold stone. The moment he made contact, the pedestal glowed, sending shockwaves through the chamber. The dark crystal shivered, and Vorith howled in rage, shadows swirling violently around him. "We will not be defeated," Vorith cried, attempting to regain control, but Elric's determination surged. With Veyra by his side, they tapped into the energy of the shard, channeling their combined power into the pedestal. "Now," Aelric commanded, feeling the pulse of light radiate from the shard into the stone, igniting it with brilliant energy. The shadows recoiled, hissing in fury as the chamber erupted into a dazzling light. But the struggle was far from over. As the pedestal shone brighter, Aelric could feel Vorith's power surging, desperate to maintain its grip. The shadows writhed and twisted, forming a cyclone around them, fighting back against the light. "Stay focused," Veyra urged, its voice steady amidst the chaos. "Together, we can break the cycle." Elric's heart raced as he poured everything he had into the light. The shadows began to shatter, disintegrating into wisps that faded into the ether. Yet, at that moment, Vorith unleashed one final surge of darkness, an attack born of pure desperation. The collision of light and dark shook the very foundation of the chamber, and Aelric felt a blinding surge of energy wash over him. Everything faded to white, enveloping him in an overwhelming brilliance that pushed back the shadows. Then, silence fell. When Elric's vision cleared, he found himself standing alone in the chamber, the pedestal now glowing softly. Vorith had vanished, but the shadows lingered, scattered remnants that whispered against the walls. "Aelric?" Veyra's voice echoed from the shadows. "Where are you?" "Here," he called out, relief flooding through him as he spotted Veyra emerging from the remnants of darkness. "What happened?" "The shadows have been weakened, but they will not disappear completely," Veyra replied, its eyes wide with concern. "We must continue to find the remaining shards before Vorith returns." Aelric nodded, still catching his breath. "We can't let our guard down. The next shard lies beyond this chamber, and we need to be ready for whatever comes next." As they moved forward, they felt the air shift again. But this time it carried a different energy, a promise of danger, perhaps, but also a hint of hope. With the strength of their light renewed, they pressed onward into the unknown, prepared to face whatever challenges awaited them in the depths of the abyssal caves. The battle was not over, and Aelric felt a fire igniting within him, a determination to reclaim Eldoria and protect the realm he loved. As Aelric and Veyra ventured deeper into the abyssal caves, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew cooler, each breath a misty cloud that dissipated almost immediately. The path narrowed, forcing them to move in tandem, their hearts synchronized with the pulsating rhythm of the shard. "Stay alert," Veyra warned, its ears perked, listening for any signs of danger. The shadows flickered ominously around them, their whispers now a low murmur, almost as if the cave itself was alive, watching their every move. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, sending a cascade of small rocks tumbling down. Aelric stumbled, but regained his balance. "What was that?" he asked, glancing at Veyra, who had gone still, its fur bristling. "Something stirs in the depths," it replied, eyes narrowing as it focused on the dark expanse ahead. "We must hurry before it awakens." They pressed forward, the path winding like a serpent through the cave. The light from the shard flickered, as if responding to the darkness that encroached upon them. Just as Aelric began to think they might be making progress, the walls of the cave shuddered again, and a low growl echoed in the distance. "Did you hear that?" Aelric whispered, dread curling in his stomach. "Yes," Veyra said, its voice barely above a whisper. "We are not alone." As they continued, the shadows thickened, wrapping around them like a cloak. Aelric felt a chill seep into his bones. Just then, a sudden rush of wind swept through the cave, extinguishing the light from the shard for a brief moment. Panic surged within him, but before he could react, the light flared back to life, revealing a massive figure looming before them. A creature emerged from the shadows, its form a grotesque fusion of darkness and stone, with glowing eyes that pierced through the gloom. It was a shadow beast, an ancient guardian of the abyssal caves, tasked with protecting the secrets hidden within. "Aelric," Veyra hissed, "we need to retreat." But it was too late. The shadow beast lunged forward, its claws slashing through the air with terrifying speed. Aelric raised the shard instinctively, its light flaring brightly in response. The beast hesitated, momentarily blinded by the radiance. "Now!" Veyra shouted, and they both dashed to the side as the creature's attack missed them by mere inches. "We can't let it corner us," Aelric yelled, darting into a narrow crevice just off the main path. Veyra followed, and they squeezed through, barely escaping the creature's wrath. As they caught their breath, Aelric glanced back at the enraged beast, its form shifting and swirling as it searched for them in the shadows. "What do we do now?" he asked, heart racing. "We need to outsmart it," Veyra replied, eyeing the shadows around them. "If we can find a way to use the cave's energy against it, we might have a chance." Aelric's mind raced, recalling the earlier surge of light they had unleashed. If the shard can push back the shadows, maybe it can also disrupt the beast's form, he mused. "But we'll need to lure it away from the shadows." Veyra nodded. "We can try to draw it out, but we must be quick. Its strength lies in the darkness." With a plan in mind, Aelric and Veyra crept back toward the main chamber, careful to avoid making noise. The shadow beast still prowled, its glowing eyes scanning the shadows hungrily. They carefully positioned themselves behind a rocky outcropping, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Aelric took a deep breath, heart pounding in his chest. "On my count," he whispered. 1, 2, 3. As they burst from their hiding spot, Aelric raised the shard high, its light piercing through the darkness. The shadow beast froze, caught off guard by the sudden burst of illumination. Veyra dashed to the side, creating a distraction. "Here," Aelric called, hoping to lure the creature closer. The beast snarled, drawn by the light. Aelric felt a surge of adrenaline as it lunged toward him, but he stood firm, channeling all his energy into the shard. "Now!" he shouted as the beast drew near. The light from the shard exploded in a brilliant flash, creating a wave of energy that washed over the creature. It howled in agony, its form flickering as the light forced it back, shattering the darkness that shielded it. But the beast was relentless. It recoiled for a moment, then charged again, furious and determined. "We need to keep it off balance," Veyra cried, leaping into the fray. As they fought together, Aelric and Veyra unleashed a barrage of light, each strike pushing back the shadows that clung to the creature. The cavern trembled with the intensity of their combined energy, and Aelric felt the bond between them strengthen with each moment. But just when it seemed they were gaining the upper hand, the creature retaliated, launching a massive claw toward Aelric. He barely managed to duck, but the force of the blow sent him sprawling to the ground, the shard slipping from his grasp. "Veyra!" he yelled, scrambling to retrieve it as the beast loomed over him, shadows swirling around its form. Veyra dashed toward him, but before it could reach him, the creature unleashed a wave of darkness that knocked Veyra back, sending it crashing against the cave wall. Elric's heart sank as he saw his friend struggling to get up, its movements sluggish. "Get up, Veyra!" he shouted, panic rising in his throat. With desperate resolve, Aelric lunged for the shard, grasping it tightly as the creature turned its attention back to him. The darkness surged, but this time Aelric was ready. With a roar, he raised the shard high, channeling every ounce of his strength into it. The light blazed, forcing the shadows back. "You will not take this realm," he cried, the energy of his determination erupting like a supernova. The light engulfed the chamber, pushing against the shadow beast with an intensity that shook the very ground. The creature staggered, its form flickering as it fought against the surge of light. Aelric could see the fear in its glowing eyes, a fleeting moment of vulnerability. "Now, Veyra!" he shouted. Veyra, gathering its strength, surged forward again, its own energy intertwining with the shard's brilliance. Together, they unleashed a final blast of light that collided with the creature, sending shockwaves through the cave. The shadow beast howled in agony, its form unraveling as the light broke through its defenses. It staggered back, shadows erupting from its body like smoke, dissipating into the air. Finally, with a final roar, the beast vanished, leaving only silence in its wake. Aelric collapsed to his knees, breathless but victorious. Veyra staggered to his side, panting heavily. "We did it," it said, a mix of disbelief and relief in its voice. "Yes, but at what cost?" Aelric replied, glancing around the cavern, still tense with residual energy. "The darkness is weakened, but it will return. We must find the next shard quickly." As they collected themselves, the air shifted again, a new presence emerging from the shadows. Aelric tensed, gripping the shard tightly, ready to fight again. But this time, the shadows parted, revealing a figure cloaked in luminescent fabric, shimmering with a light that seemed to radiate from within. "I am Lyra, keeper of the shards," the figure announced, its voice melodic and soothing. "You have proven yourselves worthy, Aelric and Veyra. The next shard lies ahead, but the path will be fraught with greater challenges. You must choose wisely." Aelric exchanged a glance with Veyra, a mix of curiosity and apprehension stirring within him. "What challenges do we face?" he asked, rising to his feet. Lyra smiled gently, the light surrounding her flickering like stars. "To reclaim the next shard, you will have to face the trials of time, where your deepest fears and regrets will manifest. Only by overcoming them can you access the power you seek." Aelric felt a chill at the mention of fears and regrets, memories he had tried to suppress rising unbidden. "But how can we overcome them?" he asked, uncertainty creeping into his voice. "You must confront them together," Lyra replied, her gaze steady. "Trust in your bond and the light within you. Only then can you navigate the trials and claim the shard." Aelric nodded, determination flaring within him. "We'll face whatever comes. We've come too far to back down now." With that, Lyra gestured for them to follow. As they moved deeper into the cave, the shadows swirled around them, but this time they felt different, less menacing and more like echoes of the past. As they walked, Elric's heart raced. He could sense the weight of their journey ahead, the memories and fears that would soon come to light. The trials would test them in ways they could not yet comprehend. But they were not alone. With Veyra by his side and the strength of the shard in his grasp, Aelric felt a flicker of hope igniting within him. They would face whatever darkness awaited them, together. As Aelric and Veyra ventured deeper into the labyrinthine passages of the abyssal caves, the atmosphere thickened, charged with a palpable tension. The shadows danced along the walls, flickering with hints of movement as if alive, each whispering dark secrets of those who had come before them. Lyra led the way, her luminescent form casting a soft glow that illuminated the path ahead. "The trials of time will test not just your strength, but the very fabric of your spirit," she explained, her voice echoing softly in the cavern. "Prepare yourselves for what lies ahead, for the shadows will reveal truths you may not wish to face." Aelric exchanged a glance with Veyra, the unspoken weight of their journey pressing down on them. They had battled shadows and darkness, but confronting their innermost fears felt like an entirely different realm of peril. "What kind of truths?" Aelric asked, his voice steady despite the churn of anxiety in his gut. "Each trial will draw upon your past," Lyra replied, her gaze unwavering. "Moments of regret, fear, and pain will manifest. Only by facing these aspects of yourselves can you hope to emerge stronger." As they continued, the tunnel widened, revealing an expansive chamber bathed in shimmering light, where a swirling vortex of energy pulsated at its center. The air crackled with magic, and Aelric felt an invisible force drawing him toward it. "Is this the entrance to the trials?" he asked, all mingling with trepidation. "Yes," Lyra affirmed. "To pass through, you must be willing to confront what lies within. Step into the light, and you will be faced with your first trial." Aelric took a deep breath, nodding at Veyra, who looked equally determined. "We're ready," he said, stepping forward. The moment he crossed the threshold, a blinding light enveloped them, and everything around them dissolved into a swirl of colors and sensations. Suddenly, they found themselves standing on a barren landscape beneath a sky roiling with dark clouds. The air was heavy, thick with despair. Aelric looked around, bewildered. "Where are we?" he asked, gripping the shard tightly. "This is a manifestation of your past," Veyra said, scanning the horizon. We must be careful. The shadows here can be deceptive. Aelric felt a sinking sensation in his chest as a figure emerged from the gloom, a younger version of himself. The boy stood alone, tears streaming down his face, the weight of the world evident in his eyes. Aelric felt a rush of emotion as he recognized the moment, when he had lost his family in the war against Vorotha's forces. No, he whispered, stepping back as the shadows began to swirl around the younger Aelric. I don't want to see this, but it was too late. The shadows coalesced, forming dark tendrils that wrapped around the young boy. Aelric felt a visceral pain as the memories flooded back, the grief and helplessness crashing over him like waves. Why couldn't I save them? The younger Aelric cried out, his voice filled with anguish. I failed them. Stop it, Aelric shouted, feeling the weight of regret suffocating him. I can't. You cannot run from this pain, Veyra urged, stepping forward. You must confront it, Aelric. This is your fear. Embrace it. Aelric hesitated, the turmoil within him raging. But as he looked at the boy, he felt an overwhelming urge to comfort him. I'm here, he said softly. You're not alone anymore. I fought for you. I fought for all of us. The shadows paused, and the younger Aelric looked up, confusion mingling with hope. Who are you? He asked, the tears still glistening in his eyes. I'm you, Aelric replied, kneeling beside the boy. I'm the part of you that survived. Together, we'll make this right. You didn't fail them. We will honor their memory by fighting for those who remain. As he spoke, the darkness began to retreat, the tendrils of shadow loosening their grip. Aelric reached out, and the boy took his hand, the warmth of their connection igniting a spark of light between them. With a surge of determination, Aelric channeled the energy of the shard into the darkness, illuminating the landscape with a brilliant glow. The shadows shattered like glass, dissolving into nothingness as the boy began to fade, his expression shifting from despair to gratitude. Thank you, he whispered before disappearing entirely. Suddenly, Aelric found himself back in the chamber with Veyra, the vortex of energy swirling before them, more vibrant than ever. You faced your first trial, Lyra's voice resonated through the air. But there are more challenges ahead. Are you ready to continue? Aelric nodded, a newfound strength surging through him. Yes, let's go, he said, determination etched on his face. With a gentle gesture, Lyra guided them toward the vortex once more. As they stepped through, the world around them transformed again, shifting into a bustling village square where laughter filled the air. Aelric felt a pang of nostalgia, but quickly dismissed it as a manifestation of the past. In the center of the village stood a large, festive gathering, and Aelric's heart raced as he recognized familiar faces. His friends, family, and loved ones were all there, smiling and celebrating. Yet, beneath the joy, he sensed an underlying current of sadness. Something was off. What's happening here? Veyra asked, its voice low, uncertainty lacing its words. This was the day of the festival, Aelric murmured, his heart heavy. Before everything changed, before the war, the atmosphere shifted abruptly. The music stopped, and the laughter turned to silence. The faces around him shifted into expressions of horror and fear. Aelric's heart raced as he recognized what was happening. The moment their peaceful lives had been shattered, a dark shadow loomed over the village, and the villagers turned to him with desperate eyes, pleading for his help. Aelric, save us, they cried in unison. No, he shouted, instinctively stepping forward, but the shadows closed in, dark tendrils reaching for him, constricting around his throat. You cannot save them, a voice echoed from the depths of the shadows, its tone cold and mocking. You were powerless then, and you are powerless now. Aelric struggled against the darkness, memories flooding his mind. The screams, the chaos, the sense of helplessness that had haunted him since that day. But then he remembered the younger version of himself, the strength he had found by confronting his past. I can't run from this, he declared, finding the resolve deep within him. I will not be defined by my failures. With a surge of courage, he called upon the shard's power, channeling light through the shadows that enveloped him. The tendrils recoiled as the brightness enveloped the village, illuminating the faces of his loved ones once more. "I am here for you," he cried, the energy of hope infusing his voice. The shadows writhed, fighting back against the light, but Aelric stood firm, his heart pounding with determination. "Together, we can overcome this," he shouted, turning to Veyra. "Help me." Veyra joined him, their energies intertwining as they poured their strength into the light. The shadows began to dissipate, revealing the villagers once more, their faces shining with hope instead of despair. "Thank you, Aelric," they called, their voices harmonizing in a chorus of gratitude. But the darkness was not yet defeated. From the depths, a powerful roar erupted, and a larger, more sinister figure emerged from the shadows, the embodiment of Aelric's deepest fears. It was Vorith, the embodiment of his failure, the manifestation of the very darkness he had fought against. "Foolish child," Vorith sneered, his voice dripping with malice. "You think you can change the past? I am the darkness that lurks within you, the shadows of your regrets. You cannot escape me." Aelric's heart raced, fear threatening to overwhelm him, but he felt Veyra's presence beside him, steady and unwavering. "We will not let you take us," Aelric shouted defiantly, the shard glowing brightly in his hands. The battle that ensued was fierce and tumultuous. Vorith lunged forward, striking with an intensity that shook the ground beneath their feet. Aelric and Veyra fought back, unleashing waves of light that collided with the darkness, creating shockwaves that reverberated through the village. With every strike, Aelric felt the weight of his memories pushing against him, but he fought through the pain, recalling the faces of those he loved, the strength of their bonds. "We can overcome this," he yelled, feeling the shard pulse with energy, reflecting the hope within him. Vorith's shadowy form twisted and writhed, trying to evade the light. "You are weak," it hissed, its voice filled with fury. "You cannot defeat your own darkness." But Aelric was no longer alone. Veyra's energy flowed through him, a beacon of strength that fortified his resolve. "Together, we are stronger than you," Veyra declared, launching into the fray. With a final surge of power, Aelric raised the shard high, and a radiant beam of light burst forth, engulfing Vorith in a brilliant explosion of energy. The darkness screamed, its form disintegrating into a flurry of shadows that scattered like smoke. The villagers cheered, their voices rising in unison, but Aelric remained vigilant. Though Vorith had retreated, he knew this was only the beginning of their trials. The abyss still held many secrets, and they would have to face each one, unearthing the darkness that lurked within them. "We did it," Veyra breathed, relief flooding through its voice. Aelric nodded, determination surging within him. "But we have more to face. The darkness isn't finished yet." Together, they stepped forward into the next challenge, ready to confront whatever awaited them in the heart of the abyssal caves. Their journey through the Shimmering Gates of Eldoria had only just begun, and the true test of their resolve was still to come. As Aelric and Veyra moved deeper into the heart of the abyssal caves, the atmosphere shifted once more, the air thickening with an eerie silence. Shadows stretched along the cavern walls, flickering like whispers of long-lost souls. A chill crept down Aelric's spine, a sense of foreboding that urged him to remain vigilant. He could feel the shard pulsing steadily in his grip, as if attuned to the dark energy that surrounded them. Lyra floated alongside them, her luminescent form casting a warm glow that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. "The next trial will be one of choice," she warned, her voice soft yet firm. "You will be confronted with visions of what could be, what you desire most. But be wary. These illusions can be deceptive." Aelric swallowed hard, a knot forming in his stomach. He had faced his past, but the thought of confronting his deepest desires was daunting. "What if we fail?" he asked, glancing at Veyra, who remained resolute by his side. "We will not fail," Veyra replied, its voice steady and reassuring. "We have faced the shadows together. We will face this too." They approached a vast chamber filled with shimmering crystals that glinted like stars in the darkness. The light refracted in mesmerizing patterns, creating an otherworldly ambience that left Aelric breathless. "This must be it," he said, stepping cautiously into the center of the room. Suddenly, the crystals began to pulse, radiating waves of energy that enveloped them in a kaleidoscope of colors. Aelric felt his senses heighten, his surroundings blurring as a powerful force tugged at his consciousness. Before he could react, a vision materialized before him. A warm, sunlit meadow stretching endlessly, alive with vibrant flowers swaying in a gentle breeze. In the distance, he saw his family, laughing and celebrating, their faces aglow with joy. Aelric's heart swelled, an aching longing rising within him. He stepped forward, reaching out to touch the scene, desperate to hold onto the happiness he had lost. But the moment his fingers grazed the image, it rippled like water, shifting into a different scene. A grand hall filled with accolades and applause. Aelric stood at the center, victorious, wearing the crown of a hero who had saved Eldoria from darkness. The cheers echoed around him, drowning out the whispers of doubt in his mind. "Look at what you could have." Voritha's voice echoed ominously from the shadows. "This is your chance to reclaim your happiness. All you must do is surrender to me." "No," Aelric shouted, shaking his head violently. "I won't give in to you again." The visions twisted, contorting into horrifying shapes. The meadow turned dark and stormy, the faces of his family transforming into shadows, their eyes hollow and accusing. "You left us," they whispered in unison, their voices laced with sorrow. "You abandoned us when we needed you most." Aelric staggered back, feeling the weight of their accusations pressing down on him. "I tried to save you," he cried, anguish tearing through him. "I fought to protect you." But the images only morphed further, revealing a future filled with destruction. A kingdom crumbling to ash, innocent lives lost, all because of his failure to act. The vision ignited a fiery panic within him, and he fell to his knees, grappling with the overwhelming despair. "Is this what you want?" Vorith taunted, stepping from the shadows with a sinister grin. "To watch everything you love perish? Join me, and I can grant you power beyond your wildest dreams. Together, we can reshape Eldoria." Aelric's heart raced, conflicted emotions swirling within him. The lure of power was intoxicating, the promise of changing the past seductive. But then he thought of Veyra, of Lyra, of the sacrifices they had made to stand against the darkness. He had chosen to fight, not for power, but for hope. "No," he said firmly, raising his head to face Vorith. "I won't give in to fear or temptation. I fight for those I love, not for myself." With a surge of determination, Aelric summoned the shard's energy, channeling it into a radiant beam that shattered the illusions surrounding him. The meadow erupted into brilliant light, the shadows dissipating under the weight of his resolve. "Your power is nothing but an illusion," Aelric declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I am not afraid of you." Vorith howled in rage, the darkness swirling around him as he struggled against the brilliance of Aelric's light. "You think you can defy me? I am the embodiment of your fears." The shadows writhed, but Aelric pressed forward, drawing strength from the memories of his loved ones, their laughter, their support. "You may have haunted my past, but you will not dictate my future." As he spoke, Veyra stepped beside him, its form radiating light that intertwined with Aelric's. Together, they formed a shield against the encroaching darkness, their combined energy pulsating with a brilliance that pushed back against Voritha's influence. Suddenly, the chamber shuddered, and the very ground beneath them began to quake. Cracks formed in the crystalline floor, and a rush of cold air surged from below, filling the room with a bone-chilling wind. "The trials are shifting," Lyra warned, her voice rising above the chaos. "We must stand firm." Voritha's figure began to dissolve into the shadows, but his voice echoed ominously. "This isn't over, Aelric. I will find a way back. Your darkness will always remain." With one final burst of light, Aelric and Veyra fought to dispel the remnants of Voritha's presence. The shadows writhed violently, but slowly they began to recede, pulled back into the depths of the chamber. As the darkness faded, Aelric and Veyra were left standing in the center of the now-still chamber. The shards of crystal glittered around them, reflecting their triumph in shards of light. Aelric let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his heart racing with adrenaline. But they knew this was just a momentary victory. The abyss still held many trials, and the road ahead would not be easy. With a nod to Veyra, Aelric steeled himself for the next challenge, ready to confront whatever awaited them beyond the Shimmering Gates of Eldoria. Together, they would face the trials, the darkness, and ultimately, their destiny. As Aelric and Veyra gathered their resolve, a faint rumbling echoed through the cavern, a reminder that the abyssal caves were alive with ancient magic and hidden perils. The air shimmered with a residual energy, still thick with the remnants of their recent confrontation. Lyra floated gracefully above them, her ethereal glow casting a reassuring light on their path. Each trial you face will test not only your strength but the bonds you share, she explained, her voice gentle yet firm. Trust in one another, for it is your unity that will guide you through the darkness. Aelric nodded, the weight of her words settling heavily on his heart. He glanced at Veyra, who stood resolute, its luminescent form shimmering with determination. We will face whatever comes next, he declared, gripping the shard tightly in his hand. Without warning, the chamber began to vibrate, and the ground split open, revealing a gaping chasm that seemed to lead into an endless abyss. Aelric felt a wave of trepidation wash over him. What now? He asked, peering into the depths. Your next trial lies below, Lyra said, guiding them closer to the edge. You must descend into the depths of the abyss. There, you will confront the shadows of your doubts and the fears that threaten to tear you apart. Doubts? Veyra asked, glancing at Aelric. What doubts? The doubts that linger in your heart, that question your worthiness to be a hero, Lyra replied. Each of you must face your own darkness, and only together can you rise above it. Aelric swallowed hard, the thought of delving deeper into his psyche daunting, but he felt a flicker of determination igniting within him. I'm ready, he said, taking a step closer to the edge. Veyra joined him, its presence a comforting balm against the uncertainty that threatened to overwhelm him. Together, Veyra affirmed, its voice steady and unwavering. Taking a deep breath, they leaped into the chasm, the air rushing past them as they plummeted into the dark depths below. The darkness enveloped them, and for a moment, Aelric felt weightless, suspended between fear and resolve. As they fell, tendrils of shadow reached up to grasp them, but the shard pulsed brightly in his hand, illuminating their descent. Suddenly, they landed softly on an obsidian floor, the darkness retreating as they gained their footing. Aelric looked around, bewildered. They were in a vast cavern filled with swirling shadows, the walls etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe. At the center stood a towering figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes glowing with an unsettling light. Welcome, the figure intoned, its voice echoing with 1,000 whispers. You have descended into the chamber of doubt. Here, your innermost fears will take form, and you will be forced to confront what you seek to avoid. What do you want from us? Aelric demanded, his heart pounding in his chest. Only the truth, the figure replied, extending its arms wide. Face the illusions that bind you, and perhaps you will find clarity. But be warned, what you see may shatter your resolve. The shadows around them began to swirl, coalescing into images that danced before Aelric's eyes. He saw himself standing alone, his family's faces twisted in sorrow and disappointment. You're not strong enough, they whispered, their voices a haunting echo of the past. You failed us. No, Aelric shouted, clenching his fists. I fought for you. I tried to save you. Did you? The figure asked, its voice dripping with disdain. You hid while they suffered. You let fear dictate your actions. How can you call yourself a hero? The images shifted, morphing into a future where Eldoria lay in ruins, the people he had fought for lost to despair. He saw Veyra standing alone, surrounded by darkness, its light fading as the shadows closed in. You're not worth saving, it whispered, its voice trembling. You'll never be enough. A surge of pain shot through Elric's heart. "No, that's not true," he cried out, desperation fueling his words. "I've learned from my mistakes. I won't let fear control me anymore." Suddenly, Veyra stepped forward, its luminescence intensifying as it confronted the figure. "You will not define us. We are more than our fears, and together, we can overcome anything." With a fierce determination, Elric joined Veyra, their energies intertwining, creating a radiant shield that pushed back against the darkness. The figure recoiled, its form flickering as the shadows shrieked in protest. "Foolish child," it spat, its voice growing more desperate. "You think your unity can conquer doubt? You are merely delaying the inevitable." But Elric felt the shard pulsing with renewed strength, the energy resonating with his resolve. "Together, we are stronger than any shadow," he shouted, the words igniting a fire within him. With a surge of power, Aelric and Veyra unleashed a wave of light, forcing the darkness to retreat. The figure writhed and screamed, the illusions shattering around them as the shadows dissipated like mist. Elric's heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins as he faced the remnants of his doubt. But even as they triumphed over the figure, Aelric knew this was not the end. The shadows were cunning, and doubt would always be lurking in the corners of his mind. They had fought bravely, but the trials were far from over. Suddenly, the cavern began to tremble, the ground shaking violently as cracks formed beneath them. "What's happening?" Veyra cried out, its glow flickering in the chaos. "The chamber of doubt is collapsing." Lyra's voice rang out, urgent and commanding. "You must escape before it is too late." Without hesitation, Aelric and Veyra turned to run, the ground shifting beneath their feet as they navigated through the collapsing shadows. The walls of the cavern crumbled around them, and they sprinted toward the flickering light that marked the exit. As they neared the edge of the chamber, they leaped through the final gap, landing in a bright corridor that shimmered with ethereal light. The darkness behind them collapsed into nothingness, leaving them breathless and shaken. "We made it," Aelric gasped, his heart pounding in his chest. But the corridor ahead was filled with swirling mist, obscuring their path. Lyra floated beside them, her form glowing brightly. "Your next trial awaits," she said, her tone serious. "Prepare yourselves." As they stepped forward into the mist, the air thickened with anticipation, and Aelric felt the weight of the unknown pressing upon them. He glanced at Veyra, who nodded in silent solidarity. Together, they would face whatever darkness lay ahead, determined to uncover the secrets hidden beyond the Shimmering Gates of Eldoria. Each step brought them closer to their destiny, the trials shaping them into the heroes they were meant to become. The journey was far from over, and the true test of their courage awaited them in the depths of the abyss. As Aelric and Veyra ventured deeper into the swirling mist, the atmosphere shifted again, thickening with a palpable tension that wrapped around them like a shroud. The path seemed to undulate beneath their feet, the ground shifting like a living creature, and strange echoes filled the air, whispers of forgotten memories and dreams unfulfilled. "What is this place?" Veyra asked, its voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid to disturb the swirling shadows that enveloped them. "It feels like a crossing between realms," Aelric replied, scanning their surroundings. "We may be entering a dimension where our past choices shape the fabric of reality." Lyra drifted ahead, her glow illuminating the path. "Stay close," she warned. "The mist of reflection holds powerful illusions, and it seeks to exploit your insecurities. Trust in yourselves and each other." Just then, the mist coalesced into images, vivid and intoxicating, each one more enticing than the last. Aelric watched as visions of his life began to unfold before him. He saw himself as a child, exploring the forests of Eldoria, laughter ringing in his ears as he played with friends under the golden sun. The warmth of nostalgia washed over him, but it quickly morphed into something darker. Suddenly, the scene shifted. He was now a young man, standing before a towering mountain, his heart filled with ambition as he sought to conquer the peak. But the mountain transformed into an insurmountable wall, and he felt the weight of failure crush his spirit. "You'll never succeed," a voice echoed, deep and taunting. You're just a fool dreaming of greatness. Aelric clenched his fists, determination surging within him. I won't let you dictate my worth, he shouted at the shadows. I know who I am. Veyra stepped forward, its luminous form shimmering with conviction. You've overcome so much already. Don't let the past pull you down. As if summoned by their defiance, the mist began to swirl violently, the echoes intensifying. Aelric and Veyra found themselves enveloped in a tempest of memories, the visions flashing before them like a chaotic tapestry. Then, a new scene emerged. Aelric stood alone in a darkened room, a feeling of isolation wrapping around him like a heavy cloak. He felt the sting of betrayal as he recalled the moment he had lost trust in those he once called friends. Their faces twisted in anger, each accusation ringing in his ears like a relentless drumbeat. You are alone, Aelric. You always will be. No, Aelric yelled, shaking his head violently. I am not alone. I have friends who believe in me. The ground shook beneath them, the mist swirling faster, and a torrent of new images rushed forward. Aelric saw himself standing in front of a great gate, trembling with uncertainty as he hesitated to step through. He was haunted by the fear of what lay beyond, the unknown, the possibility of failure. You'll never be strong enough, a shadow hissed. Turn back now while you still can. Veyra's voice pierced through the tempest, filled with warmth and encouragement. You have the strength, Aelric. Remember what you fought for, the people you want to protect. Don't let doubt consume you. As their voices intertwined, a brilliant light erupted from the shard in Aelric's hand, breaking through the darkness. The visions began to dissolve, revealing the swirling mists once more. I will not be defined by my fears, Aelric shouted, raising the shard high. I choose my path. With those words, the mist exploded into a cascade of color, enveloping them in warmth and light. The shadows screamed as they retreated, and the illusions faded into nothingness. Aelric and Veyra stood firm, united against the darkness, the echoes of doubt slowly dissipating. But even as they emerged victorious from the mist of reflection, Aelric knew that the next challenge awaited them. The corridor ahead shimmered with an ominous glow, the air thick with unspoken dangers. We did it, he said, his voice filled with a mix of relief and uncertainty. For now, Veyra replied, glancing ahead, but I sense there's more to come. We cannot let our guard down. As they moved forward, the corridor widened into a vast chamber adorned with intricate carvings depicting battles and victories long past. But among the heroics, Aelric noticed darker images lurking at the edges, shadows of despair, loss, and betrayal. Beware, Lyra warned. This chamber holds the echoes of past heroes, those who fell to the darkness. Their regrets linger here, and they may seek to ensnare you. Aelric's heart raced as they stepped into the chamber, the shadows darting at the corners of his vision. The air grew heavy with anticipation, and he could feel the energy shifting around them. The walls seemed to pulse, alive with whispers that brushed against his ears, pulling at his thoughts. Why do you continue to fight? A voice rang out, deep and resonant, echoing through the chamber. You know the darkness will always find a way back. You can't escape your fate. Aelric turned to face the source of the voice, his heart pounding. Emerging from the shadows was a figure cloaked in dark armor, its face hidden beneath a hood. It radiated an aura of power and sorrow, and Aelric felt an unsettling familiarity about it. Who are you? Aelric demanded, stepping forward with Veyra at his side. I am a guardian of this realm, the figure replied, its voice a low growl. I have seen countless heroes rise and fall, all striving against the same shadows you face. But they all succumb to despair, just as you will. No, Aelric shouted defiantly. I refuse to believe that. I have fought too hard to let despair win. The figure chuckled darkly. Foolish boy, do you think your resolve is enough? The shadows are patient and cunning. They will find your weakness. With a sudden motion, the figure raised its hand, and shadows erupted from the walls, coiling around Aelric and Veyra like serpents. Aelric felt the darkness tightening its grip, threatening to suffocate him. He struggled against it, recalling the warmth of his friends, the laughter of the villagers, and the hope that had brought him this far. "Veyra, we need to combine our strength," he urged, feeling the shadows pulling at his resolve. "Together," Veyra echoed, its light intensifying as it reached for Aelric. Their energies intertwined, creating a brilliant barrier that began to push back against the encroaching darkness. But the figure merely laughed, the sound echoing like thunder. "You think your bond can protect you? I will tear you apart until all that remains is your doubt." The shadows lunged forward, but Aelric and Veyra stood firm, their combined light shining brighter than ever. "You will not break us," Aelric shouted, the shard in his hand pulsing with newfound energy. "We will forge our own destiny." With that declaration, they unleashed a surge of light that burst forth like a sun rising from the horizon, illuminating the chamber and pushing back against the shadows. The figure's laughter turned to rage as it was engulfed by the brilliance, struggling against the onslaught. The chamber trembled, the walls vibrating with the intensity of their combined power. Aelric felt the surge of energy coursing through him, fueling his determination. "We are not alone in this fight," he declared. "We stand for those who have come before us and those who will come after." The shadows shrieked as the light engulfed them, their forms dissolving into nothingness. The figure roared in defiance, but its voice was swallowed by the radiance. Aelric and Veyra pressed forward, the darkness retreating until it was just a whisper against the overwhelming brightness. And just when they thought they had triumphed, a flicker of doubt crept back into Elric's mind. Would their victory hold? Or was this merely a temporary reprieve before the shadows returned to claim what they had lost? As the light began to fade, revealing the now silent chamber, Aelric took a deep breath. "We need to keep moving," he urged, glancing at Veyra. "There will be more challenges ahead." Together, they stepped out of the chamber, the lingering shadows behind them. But Aelric felt a sense of foreboding settle in the pit of his stomach. The Shimmering Gates of Eldoria had promised a path filled with trials, and the true test of their strength still lay ahead. As Aelric and Veyra emerged from the chamber, the atmosphere shifted once again, the air charged with anticipation and unspoken challenges. They found themselves standing in a long, winding corridor bathed in soft, pulsating light, the walls adorned with intricate mosaics that told stories of ancient heroes and their triumphs over darkness. Yet, as they walked, Aelric couldn't shake the feeling that something watched them from the shadows. "What's next?" Veyra asked, its voice a blend of excitement and trepidation. "We must remain vigilant," Aelric replied, scanning their surroundings. "I feel the presence of something lurking nearby." The trials have only just begun. As they ventured further down the corridor, a chilling breeze swept through, extinguishing some of the light. Aelric tightened his grip on the shard, the warmth of its glow providing a sense of security against the encroaching darkness. The corridor seemed to stretch infinitely before them, twisting and turning, as if leading them deeper into the heart of Eldoria's secrets. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the hall, followed by a resonant voice that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. "Welcome, brave souls, to the Hall of Echoes," it intoned, a deep, sonorous tone filled with both reverence and menace. "Here, you will confront the truth of your existence, the essence of your choices." Aelric halted, his heart racing. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the fear that threatened to creep in. "I am the Guardian of Echoes," the voice responded, reverberating in the air. "I reflect the choices you have made and the path you have taken. Each decision has led you to this moment, and here, you will face the consequences." As the words lingered in the air, the corridor began to shimmer, and the walls transformed into a swirling tapestry of light and shadow. Images burst forth, revealing pivotal moments in Elric's life. His first taste of victory, the heartache of loss, the moments of doubt that had shaped him. "Witness your past," the Guardian commanded. "Feel the weight of your decisions." Elric's breath caught in his throat as he saw himself standing before a wounded friend, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty. He could hear the frantic cries for help, the desperation echoing in the air. "Why didn't I act?" he thought, guilt flooding over him. "I could have saved him." Veyra's voice cut through his thoughts, grounding him. Aelric, you did what you could. We learn and grow from our choices. But the visions continued, shifting to a time when he had turned away from the call to adventure, choosing safety over risk. You abandoned your dreams, the Guardian taunted. You chose comfort over courage. No, I had to protect my family, Aelric protested, but doubt began to creep into his heart. The images became more intense, filled with regret and remorse, forcing him to confront the shadows he had buried deep within himself. I am no longer that person, Aelric said defiantly. I have fought to overcome my past. I am here for a reason. The Guardian's laughter echoed around him, filled with both admiration and scorn. You believe you can escape your past? The echoes of your choices will always haunt you. They shape who you are, whether you acknowledge them or not. Veyra stepped closer, its luminescence shining brighter. We are more than our pasts, it insisted, voice unwavering. Each trial has brought us here, and we are stronger for it. Aelric has grown through every experience. With a flick of its wrist, the Guardian conjured a whirlwind of visions, moments of strength and resilience, victories won and alliances forged. Aelric felt the energy pulse within him, each memory a reminder of the bonds he had formed, the lives he had touched. The path to the present was littered with mistakes, but those very mistakes had forged him into the hero he was becoming. Enough, Aelric shouted, the weight of doubt lifting as he embraced the essence of his journey. I will not be shackled by regret. I choose to move forward. With that declaration, the swirling images began to shatter, fragments of light exploding in every direction. The Guardian's expression shifted from amusement to concern as the light enveloped Aelric and Veyra, pushing back against the shadows that clung to the corners of the hall. You may have strength, but the truth cannot be escaped, it warned, retreating into the shadows as the echoes began to fade. Aelric and Veyra stood firm, their united energy illuminating the hall, dispelling the remnants of doubt that had threatened to engulf them. We are ready for whatever comes next, Aelric declared, glancing at Veyra, who radiated warmth and solidarity. The hall transformed around them, the walls settling into a tranquil stillness, leaving only a single, majestic door at the far end, adorned with intricate carvings of mythical creatures and ancient runes. That must be our way forward, Veyra said, its voice filled with determination. As they approached the door, Aelric felt a sense of foreboding wash over him. The air crackled with energy, and he sensed that this next trial would demand everything from them. The door stood tall, pulsating with an ethereal glow that beckoned them closer. Are you ready? Veyra asked, its eyes reflecting the shimmering light. Aelric took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. As ready as we can be. Whatever lies beyond, we will face it together. With a firm resolve, they reached for the door, their fingers brushing against the cool surface. As they pushed it open, a rush of wind surged through the hall, and they stepped into the unknown, the anticipation of the next trial hanging heavy in the air. What awaited them was a realm of vibrant colors and twisted landscapes, where reality blurred and the very fabric of time felt malleable. Each step they took brought forth echoes of laughter and whispers of despair, intermingling in a chaotic dance that threatened to unravel their resolve. Stay focused, Aelric urged, feeling the disorientation wash over him. We must not lose sight of our goal. But as they moved forward, the world around them began to shift and change. Flowers bloomed in brilliant hues, only to wilt and decay within moments. Trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching out as if to ensnare them. The very ground beneath their feet rippled like water, making it difficult to maintain balance. Then, from the depths of the vibrant chaos, a figure emerged, tall and shadowy, cloaked in colors that seemed to shift with every movement. Its eyes glimmered with an unnatural light, and it surveyed Aelric and Veyra with an amused expression. Welcome, travelers. You have entered the realm of whispers, where your deepest desires and darkest fears intertwine. Who are you? Aelric demanded, his voice steady despite the tumultuous energy surrounding them. I am called Ethera, the Weaver of Fates, the figure replied, a smile curving its lips. Here, The threads of your existence are woven into a tapestry that reveals your true selves. You wish to become heroes, yet you must first confront the desires that drive you. With a wave of its hand, Ethera conjured an intricate tapestry of shimmering threads that floated in the air before them. Each thread pulsed with energy, and Aelric felt a magnetic pull, drawing him closer. "What do you want?" Ethera asked, its tone enticing. "What do you truly desire?" Aelric hesitated, the question echoing in his mind. He had fought so hard to protect Eldoria, to become a hero worthy of the name. But beneath that desire lay an undeniable truth, an aching wish to be seen, to be valued not just as a protector, but as someone worthy of love and friendship. "I want to be a true hero," he admitted, the words slipping out before he could think. "But I also want to know that I matter, that my life has purpose beyond the battles I fight." Ethera's eyes sparkled with intrigue. Ah, the longing for validation. A powerful desire, indeed, but it can also lead you astray. Are you prepared to face the consequences of your yearning? Before Aelric could respond, the tapestry flickered, revealing a vision of Eldoria in flames. Despair painted across the faces of its people. He saw himself standing alone amidst the chaos, his heart heavy with the weight of failure. "You failed them," the vision whispered. "You wanted to be a hero, but you couldn't save them." "No," Aelric shouted, shaking his head violently. "I won't let that be my fate." Veyra stepped beside him, its presence a grounding force. "We will fight for them. Together, we will protect Eldoria." Ethera chuckled softly, the sound like rustling leaves. "Ah, unity. A commendable choice. But the darkness you face will not be easily vanquished. Your desires can turn to obsessions, and in the depths of your heart, doubt can fester." With a flick of its fingers, the tapestry morphed once again, now revealing Aelric's friends and family, faces filled with worry and doubt. "They believe you will fail. They believe you will abandon them, just as you did before." The images twisted, creating a nightmarish scenario where Aelric stood powerless, surrounded by shadows that whispered accusations of his inadequacy. "You're not worthy of their love. You will never be enough." Aelric staggered back, a sense of dread coiling around him. "No, I've changed. I've fought to be better. But have you truly?" Ethera pressed, its voice a chilling melody that sent shivers down his spine. "Your past is a haunting echo. You cannot escape its grasp." As the visions intensified, Aelric felt a suffocating weight pressing down on him. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of doubt drowning out his resolve. "You will lose everything. You cannot save them." But just as despair threatened to consume him, he remembered the warmth of friendship, the bonds he had forged, and the hope that had driven him to this moment. "I won't give in," he declared, clenching his fists as a spark ignited within him. "I choose to fight. I choose to believe in myself and those I care about." With a surge of energy, he reached for the shard, its brilliance exploding forth and pushing back against the shadows. The tapestry shivered under the weight of his conviction, the threads vibrating with newfound light. Veyra stood resolutely beside him, its own energy flaring with determination. "We are not defined by our fears. We have the strength to forge our own fate." As their powers intertwined, a blinding light enveloped the chamber, dissolving the haunting visions and shattering the oppressive shadows. Ethera's expression shifted from amusement to anger, the swirling colors around it darkening as it struggled against the radiant force. "You think you can defy fate?" Ethera seethed, its voice now a low growl. "I am the keeper of your truths." But Aelric and Veyra pressed on, their united will driving the shadows back. "We are more than our pasts," Aelric shouted, feeling the energy swell within him. "We will not be bound by your chains." The light erupted, consuming Ethera and the dark energy surrounding them. As the blinding brilliance swept through the realm, Aelric felt a wave of liberation wash over him. The whispers of doubt receded, leaving behind a profound sense of clarity. When the light finally faded, they found themselves standing in a serene glade, vibrant flowers blooming around them and sunlight filtering through the canopy above. Aelric gasped, the beauty of the scene contrasting sharply with the turmoil they had just faced. "What just happened?" Veyra asked, its voice filled with awe. "I think we confronted our truths," Aelric replied, his heart still racing. "We faced the darkness within and emerged stronger for it." But even as he spoke, an unsettling sensation lingered in the back of his mind. But what if there's more to come? What if this is only the beginning of the trials we must face? A shadow flickered at the edge of the glade, a subtle reminder that their journey was far from over. Aelric steeled himself, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The Shimmering Gates of Eldoria had promised trials beyond imagination, and he was determined to emerge victorious. The tranquil glade was a brief respite, a deceptive calm that belied the uncertainty lurking just beneath the surface. As Aelric and Veyra stood in the warm sunlight, the vibrant colors around them felt almost surreal, a sharp contrast to the turmoil they had just endured. Yet, the serene beauty did little to quell the nagging sensation that something was still amiss. Aelric took a moment to collect his thoughts. "We've overcome the Guardian and faced our fears, but I can't shake the feeling that this isn't the end," he murmured, his brow furrowed with concern. Veyra tilted its head, its eyes shimmering with understanding. "The trials of Eldoria are layered and complex. Each victory reveals new challenges. We must remain vigilant." Suddenly, a soft rustling echoed through the glade, and a figure emerged from behind a thicket of shimmering trees. It was a woman, ethereal in appearance, her flowing gown seemingly woven from the very light of the sun. She moved with an elegance that captivated Aelric, but her expression was somber, eyes reflecting a deep well of knowledge. "Welcome, brave souls," she said, her voice melodic yet filled with an underlying sorrow. "I am Aelric, the keeper of lost dreams. You have traversed the trials well, but your journey is far from complete." Aelric exchanged a glance with Veyra, both intrigued and wary. "What do you mean, keeper?" Aelric asked, stepping closer. "What lies ahead?" Aelric gestured for them to follow her deeper into the glade. "This realm is a nexus of hope and despair. Many dreams have been forged here, but countless others remain unfulfilled, trapped in the echoes of the past. Your actions have awakened energies long dormant, and now the fabric of fate hangs in the balance." As they walked, the trees parted to reveal a shimmering pool of water that mirrored the sky. "This is the pool of reflection," Aelric explained. "It reveals the true nature of one's heart and the paths that lie ahead. You may seek clarity here, but know that what you discover may test your resolve." Aelric approached the pool, its surface smooth and glassy, reflecting his image and that of Veyra beside him. He knelt, peering into the depths, and felt a rush of energy course through him. Visions danced across the water's surface, images of Eldoria, vibrant and thriving, interspersed with visions of chaos and destruction. He saw himself at the center, choices spiraling outwards, each decision leading to a different outcome. "What do you see?" Veyra asked, its voice a gentle nudge back to the present. "I see the potential of our choices," Aelric replied, entranced by the visions. "But there's a darkness that threatens to overshadow everything we've fought for. I can't help but feel that we're racing against time." Aelric nodded solemnly. "You are correct. The balance of fate is delicate, and forces of darkness seek to disrupt it. An ancient power, once thought vanquished, stirs once more. If left unchecked, it will consume not just Eldoria, but all realms connected to it. What can we do?" Veyra asked, determination flaring in its eyes. "You must seek the shards of equilibrium," Aelric instructed, her voice firm. "Scattered throughout the realms, they hold the power to restore balance and counteract the darkness. But be warned, each shard is guarded by a trial that will challenge your very essence." Aelric felt a surge of urgency. "Where do we start?" Aelric pointed beyond the glade, where the trees thinned and a path wound toward distant mountains, their peaks cloaked in swirling mists. "The first shard lies at the summit of Whispers. It is a place of secrets, where the past intertwines with the future. You must confront the memories that bind you to your fears." With a determined nod, Aelric stood tall. "Then we have no time to waste." As they began their journey down the path, The air grew heavier, charged with anticipation. Shadows danced at the periphery of their vision, and the whispers of the glade faded into a haunting echo. Each step felt like a descent into the unknown, the weight of their mission pressing down upon them. "Do you think we're ready for this?" Veyra asked, its voice laced with uncertainty. Aelric looked ahead, feeling the energy of the journey pulse through him. "We have to be. We've already faced so much, and we're still standing. Together, we can confront whatever lies ahead." As they trekked deeper into the wilderness, the scenery shifted dramatically. The lush greenery of the glade gave way to rocky terrain, and the path twisted and turned through jagged cliffs and steep ravines. Aelric felt the temperature drop as they climbed higher, the air thick with an otherworldly energy that crackled against his skin. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the mountains, reverberating off the rocky walls. Aelric halted, adrenaline surging through him. "What was that?" he asked, scanning the area for the source. "Something powerful," Veyra replied, its luminescence flickering slightly. "We must be cautious." As they continued their ascent, the shadows grew darker, and the roar sounded again, closer this time. Aelric's heart raced, and he instinctively reached for the shard, its warmth reassuring against the cold air. Suddenly, a massive creature emerged from the mist, a dragon, its scales glinting like obsidian in the dim light. Its eyes burned with an ancient intelligence, and it regarded Aelric and Veyra with an intensity that sent shivers down Aelric's spine. "Who dares to approach the summit of whispers?" The dragon boomed, its voice rumbling like distant thunder. Aelric stepped forward, forcing himself to stand tall. "We seek the shard of equilibrium. We have come to restore balance to Eldoria." The dragon studied them for a long moment, its gaze penetrating. "Many have sought the shard, but few have possessed the courage to confront their own truths. What makes you different?" "We are willing to face whatever trials lie ahead," Aelric declared, his voice steady. "We've already confronted our fears. We will not back down." The dragon's lips curled into a fierce grin, revealing rows of sharp teeth. "Very well, then. You may proceed, but first, you must prove your worth. Answer me this. What is the greatest burden you carry in your heart?" Aelric's mind raced, the question echoing in his thoughts. He felt the weight of his past pressing down on him, the choices he had made, the people he had failed to protect. But deeper still lay a yearning for acceptance, for the validation he had sought throughout his life. "The greatest burden?" he echoed, feeling the truth spill from his lips. "It is the fear of failure, the fear that I will not be enough to save those I love." The dragon nodded slowly, its expression shifting to one of understanding. "A heavy burden indeed. But know this, you are not alone in your struggles. Everyone carries their own fears and regrets. It is the acknowledgement of those burdens that gives you strength." Veyra stepped forward, its voice filled with conviction. "Together, we will face our fears and emerge stronger. We will protect Eldoria and all we hold dear." The dragon's gaze softened, and it lowered its massive head, granting them access to the path beyond. "Then go forth, brave souls. Confront the truth that awaits you at the summit. The shard you seek lies within the heart of your memories. But beware, the path is fraught with illusions that may lead you astray." With a final nod of gratitude, Aelric and Veyra continued their ascent, the air growing thicker with anticipation. The terrain became increasingly treacherous, rocky outcroppings jutting out like jagged teeth, and the wind howled fiercely around them. As they approached the summit, Aelric felt a familiar tug at the edges of his mind, a whisper of doubt that threatened to creep in. Memories flickered in his thoughts, moments of loss and regret that had shaped him into who he was. But he steeled himself, reminding himself of the strength he had found in their journey thus far. At the peak, they were greeted by an expansive view that took Aelric's breath away. The landscape stretched out beneath them, rolling hills, deep valleys, and the shimmering waters of Eldoria's lakes glinting in the fading light. But amid the beauty, a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. In the center of the summit stood a stone pedestal, adorned with intricate carvings that glowed softly. Atop it rested the shard of equilibrium, pulsating with a harmonious energy that resonated with Aelric's own heartbeat. He felt an irresistible pull towards it, an urgency to grasp its power. But as he approached the pedestal, shadows began to swirl around them, coalescing into forms that mirrored his deepest fears. He saw himself standing powerless, watching his friends fall to darkness, unable to save them. The vision twisted, morphing into countless scenarios of failure and loss. "No," Aelric shouted, forcing himself to break free from the onslaught of doubt. "I am not defined by my fears." Veyra stood by his side, its glow illuminating the darkness. "You have the strength to choose. Remember who you are and the bonds you've formed." With newfound determination, Aelric stepped closer to the shard, reaching out with trembling hands. The shadows lunged, trying to pull him back, but he gritted his teeth and pressed forward. "I choose hope. I choose to fight for my friends." As his fingers brushed the shard, a wave of energy surged through him, illuminating the shadows and casting them away. The shard pulsed with brilliant light, enveloping them both in a cocoon of warmth. In that moment, Aelric felt the burdens of his past lift, replaced by the knowledge that he was capable of forging a new destiny. The shadows dissipated, and Aelric stood at the pedestal, the shard now glowing brightly in his hand. Veyra beamed with pride, its essence radiating with joy. "You did it. We have the shard." But as they turned to leave, a sinister laughter echoed through the air, sending chills down their spines. "Foolish children," a voice boomed, dark and chilling. "You think you have one? This is but the beginning of your trials." Aelric and Veyra exchanged a look of horror as the mist coalesced, revealing Ethera, their previous adversary, its form twisting in the shadows. "You may have claimed one shard, but there are others, and I will not allow you to succeed." With a wave of its hand, the world around them began to distort, warping and twisting into a kaleidoscope of nightmares. The summit faded away, replaced by an endless void where echoes of their worst fears surrounded them. Face your truths once more, and see if you are truly worthy of the power you seek. Ethera shrieked, laughter echoing through the darkness. Aelric felt the cold grip of fear returning, but he clutched the shard tightly, its light providing a beacon of hope. "We won't give up. We will face whatever lies ahead together." As the darkness surged towards them, they braced themselves for the next wave of challenges. The Shimmering Gates of Eldoria had opened a path fraught with danger, but their journey was far from over. With the shard in hand, Aelric and Veyra were ready to confront the next trial, to unravel the mysteries that awaited them, and to stand against the darkness that threatened to consume their world. As the swirling darkness closed in, Aelric and Veyra stood shoulder to shoulder, resolute in the face of Ethera's sinister presence. The weight of the shard pulsed in Aelric's hand, its light battling against the encroaching shadows. He felt a surge of determination coursing through him, grounding him in the moment. "Remember who you are," Veyra shouted, its voice rising above the chaos. "We are defined not by our fears, but by how we face them." Aelric nodded, focusing on the radiant energy of the shard. "We will not be broken." He closed his eyes, allowing the warmth of hope to wash over him. "We will confront this darkness and emerge stronger." With a fierce shout, they thrust the shard forward, its light exploding outward and illuminating the void. The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned by the brilliance. Ethera's laughter faltered as it shielded its eyes from the radiant glow. "You think you can defeat me with mere light?" Ethera sneered, its form flickering with irritation. "I am the embodiment of your fears, the shadows that haunt you." "Not anymore," Aelric declared, stepping boldly into the light. "We control our own destinies. We will not let fear dictate who we are." In that moment, the shard responded to Aelric's conviction, sending forth a wave of energy that pierced through the darkness. The shadows trembled, revealing glimpses of memories, moments of love, friendship, and hope that had been overshadowed by doubt. With each pulse of light, Aelric faced the fears laid bare before him. The fear of failure, the fear of loss, and the fear of inadequacy. But with every heartbeat, he embraced the truth that these fears were merely reflections of his past, not definitive markers of his future. Your power is an illusion, Veyra echoed, its glow intensifying. We are not defined by our fears, but by our choices. As the light surged, Ethera's form began to fragment, shadows scattering like mist in the sunlight. No, this cannot be, it roared, anger and desperation mingling in its voice. You will never be free of me. But Aelric and Veyra pressed on, their hearts united in purpose. We choose hope. We choose to fight for a brighter future. With one final push, they unleashed the shard's energy, dispelling the darkness once and for all. As the blinding light enveloped them, Aelric felt a profound sense of liberation. The shadows faded, and in their place blossomed a vibrant landscape filled with life, colors more vivid than ever before. He and Veyra stood together, the shard now a beacon of hope in a world reborn. Have we really done it? Veyra asked, glancing around in wonder. I think we have, Aelric replied, a smile breaking across his face. We faced our fears and emerged stronger. We chose to believe in ourselves and in each other, and in that moment, they understood the true moral of their journey, that courage is not the absence of fear, but the resolve to confront it. It is the belief that, even in the darkest of times, the light of hope can shine through. As they stood amidst the beauty of the renewed world, Aelric and Veyra realized that their journey had only just begun. The Shimmering Gates of Eldoria had revealed that there would always be trials ahead, but they would face them together, united by their strength and unwavering hope.